Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining another session on my declassified Caribbean news and commentary section. Not session, but channel. Now, today we are going to be looking at the topic: the new Tower of Babel. Are we building a new world religion? That is what many people are questioning because what we're seeing in our world today is something that is quite interesting. With all the talk of interfaith, interreligion, and we can see where we spoke about the religion of science, we are seeing where our world is moving towards a dictatorial and totalitarian state. And oftentimes, when we think about totalitarian state, we think about false religion. Now, the Google here is describing to Babel. What is Babel? We call it the Tower of Babel, which means to babble. And to babble means to confuse or confound. And in Genesis 11, verse 9, it attributes the Hebrew version of the name Babel to the verb balal, which means to confuse or confound in Hebrew. The first century Roman Jewish author Flavius Josephus similarly explained that the name was derived from the Hebrew word Babel, which we call Babel, meaning confusion. And right now, that word befits everything that is happening in our society right now. Our society is rather confused. We don't really know what is happening. We're hearing peace talks in the Middle East, and then afterwards, it's followed by strikes, it's followed by bombings, and people are concerned. What are we hearing? What are we listening to? What are we watching? And are we really being told the truth? Now, if people are that confused in a world where we think we are postmodernists, where people have access to information daily at the tip of their fingers, then why is it that we are living in this Babel, this world of Babylon, as some people will call it? We know that the first, the empire of Babylon was derived from that word Babel. And Babylon, if we should go back, was an empire of many religions, right? Many people had different religions. Good afternoon, Michael Smith, and welcome to the live session. And we have here Christianity is the biggest religion on the planet. All the world will soon wonder after that. We also have Islam. Remember, Islam also has billions of people worldwide. Let's not forget that. And we must not forget, too, that India, which is one of the most, if not the most populous countries in the world, it also has a big religion. Now, let's look at the Tower of Babel. The National Geographic says here, for centuries, the biblical story of the... Now, let me read here before I get into that. The National Geographic is asking, was there a real Tower of Babel? This temple is the leading contender, and many archaeologists believe the famed tower from the book of Genesis may have had a real historical counterpart in ancient Mesopotamia. So the fact of the matter is that, yes, National Geographic is saying this might have been a reality. It was a reality, but they're actually confirming it. The archaeologists are confirming the reality of the Bible. For centuries, the biblical story of the Tower of Babel has been used to explain the origins of the world's different languages and to point out the pitfalls of attempting to compete with God. Now, I did tell you that as a person who studied languages, there is no other explanation why the world population, speaks so many different languages, right? There's none. The only explanation that they have, intellectuals have, is going right back to the Tower of Babel. There's no other explanation, whether you're an atheist or you're religious or whatever. That is the standard explanation that has been forwarded. Now, but did the tower really exist? The answer could be yes. Both archaeologists and historians believe the Tower of Babel from the book of Genesis actually had a historical counterpart in ancient Mesopotamia, and that is the Etemenenaki. But though modern research has revealed plenty of potential evidence that such a structure not only existed but was known throughout the ancient world, the case for a real-life Tower of Babel is far from closed. So people are still discussing it, and they're saying What did we have a Tower of Babel? But what we're seeing in our world today, that is exactly what they're building. Now, I did show you also that in Brussels, they have a structure in Brussels, right at the European Union, the head office of the European Union. When they were building it, they said they were building the Tower of Babel, and this time they are going to succeed. And what do they mean by that? They mean that they're trying to put the world together. And at this time, through technologies, through AIs, and everything that we're seeing developing in this modern world, they are going to succeed. So say these people. Now, though tradition holds that the prophet Moses wrote Genesis and the other 4 books of the Jewish Torah, modern historians believe it was actually written by a variety of authors at different points in ancient history. The book tells of a God who created earth and humanity, then destroyed most of creation with a massive flood after humans proved corrupt, violent, and sinful. God spared Noah and his family, who wait on the flood on a custom-built ark. Now, we could see this in chapter 11 of Genesis, describes the aftermath of these events, portraying a planet with a single language and a unified people who moved to the land of Shinar, thought to correspond to the territory of ancient Babylonia in southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. Now, did you know that Saddam Hussein said that he wanted to rebuild Babylon? And that was one of the reasons they took him out too. He said that he was in the process of rebuilding Babylon, as it was called, now in its glory days. Now, Michael said more Christians are Muslims. Muslims call Muslims call the son of Mary their prophet, and they have a book of Mary in their writings, so they will wander too. Now, when we take Christians, now you have to now separate, Catholics from Protestants and all of that, because Christians are also not united. That's one of the things that we have to understand. And that's why we are where we are now, because of that division in Christianity. Even atheists will wander after the beast too. They're open to believe in signs to convince them of Christ as well. So let's get into a brief clipping of a video from YouTube, and let us see where we're going in terms of this one world religion. I thought that this was a very good synopsis of where we are heading as a people as regards to this one world religion. And that's what we are going down. So we have a one world economic system, and we have a one world political system, and their final attempt is to move us into what is known as a one world religion. So let me open this.
In the last video, part 10 of this prophecy series, we went deeper into the plots and agendas of the enemy. We went into understanding the second goal of the satanic agenda, which is to have a one world government. That video tied in the reality of where we currently are and what time it is in this world. As we close out this portion of the series, speaking on the satanic side to all this, we must discuss one more agenda. As I said in the last 2 videos, there is a goal by Satan to be like the Most High, and he wants to destroy and pollute as much of our Father's creation as possible. All his agendas are all about destroying our Father's creation. So right now, the world that we live in, we are completely bombarded with agendas that are all about these 2 goals. For him to be worshipped like the Most High, and for him to destroy and pollute as much of Yah's creation as he can. As I explained, there are 3 main agendas that everything, and I do mean everything happening, is all about bringing. Those 3 main agendas are the coming of the lawless one, the coming of a one world government, and the coming of a one world religion. In the last 2 videos, we covered the lawless one and the coming of the one world government. In this last installment on the satanic agenda, I will be dealing with the topic I have also dealt with extensively but have not covered in some time. The last part of this agenda is the coming of a one world religion. A long time ago, I used to hear about this agenda, and I used to think it was impossible, or at least a long way off. But as I engage with this world today and see what is in the hearts and minds of the people, it's easy to see that they will gladly accept this in order to have the peace that they desire. Today, the world sadly is ready to accept a world religion. People say that it's our religious beliefs that divide the world, and if we got rid of that, there would be more harmony and more peace in the world. And it should not be a surprise that this is what a vast majority of people believe, even many Christians. We are fast approaching a new world where all that live will worship one God and live in harmony. The main problem with that future is that the God that everyone will be worshiping will be Lucifer, and the harmony is fake. It's a fake one built around massive control and legal slavery. And we know this as the New World Agenda. But that's what the world desires. Today, the question people have is, do we all worship the same God, just by different names? Because we are so close to the satanic agenda becoming a reality, the lines have been very blurred. So as we review this last side to the 3 satanic agendas, this last part should really help all who are struggling to understand where we are on the timeline of the end times. This understanding can really help break it all down. We're going to dig in. Let's begin.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
Okay, so what I'm going to do to break this down is to start at the beginning. So we will start at the division. So let's bring it all the way back. In the ancient world, in the first human civilization, we see the Empire of Samaria in Mesopotamia, which today will be in southern Iraq. This civilization decided it was going to challenge Yah and build a tower that reached to the heavens. They all spoke the same languages, and they all followed their one world leader, Nimrod, to challenge Yahuwah. They were all in unison and worked together to come against our Creator. Yahuwah saw what they were doing and confused their languages. So they were no longer able to communicate, and this stopped their rebellion. They then were scattered over the face of it, and this plot of the whole world coming together, rebelling against our Creator, was not seen in our history again. The place they came together at was called Babel, because Yahuwah confused the language of all the earth. And the tower that was built to reach the heavens, that was never finished, is what we know as the Tower of Babel. Now, I'm sure you have heard the phrase, history repeats itself, right? Well, the reason I went over this history is because that is precisely what we are seeing today. Our modern day world is repeating the first goal of the first known world civilization. The world is greater of this world, the Most High Yahuwah. Let me explain more from understanding history. You see, the people of the ancient world, they were pagans. They had a polytheistic belief system that made them believe in multiple gods. All the beliefs that centered from the ancient world were all a part of a mystery religion. The ordinary people of the cultures worshipped the way that they were told to, but all the real knowledge of who is being worshipped was held by the elites. This is how they controlled the beliefs. They never gave the deep info to the masses. They just created the belief system and told them how to worship. And throughout all of history, these pagan beliefs and religions, though their gods had different names, they were all the same God.
Mm-hmm.
The key to understand is that the God that they all worshipped is Lucifer, the fallen angel, the light bearer. Now, what's important to understand is the separation, because one might try to say that through all the different pagan beliefs, there was already a world religion, but that is not true. Though the civilizations believed in these pagan structures, there was not unity of beliefs. There was still complete division because the world was not together. Empire would topple empire, and there was no unity under their beliefs. And that's a big point by itself, but there was another major issue. You see, Yahuwah made a covenant with a small nation of people that would be his special chosen people. Though the world believed in many gods, this one nation would only know one God and be set apart from all the other nations of the world. And there was nothing that Satan could do about it. And that's where we have the division that's in the world today. Now, I skipped over a lot of information, and you may have questions about many details in the middle of all that. If you're new to this channel, please know I have covered this history extensively in other videos. You can go through the playlist to find subjects you want to understand. But listen, if it's in a series, start at part 1 because I do build on information. Like I was saying, the main division in the world today is because of the set-apart nation that Yahuwah created in the ancient nation of Israel. And through them, he introduced himself to the known world. After Yahuwah sent his son Yahusha, the Messiah, to take the penalty of sin for the whole world, and he created a way for the world to come back to him in fellowship, Satan then tried to hijack our belief and mingle his mystery religion in with what they used to call the way, and what we now call today Christianity. Satan brought in his confusion and masked his pagan religion into a form of Christianity, and now tries to present himself as one God. And so, long story made short, all the ancient pagan mystery religions, as well as the modern religions like Islam and different branches of Christianity like Catholicism and Mormonism, they are all different religions that are centered around the same God. And so when people are believing that they are all worshiping the same God, there is some truth to that. But there is a huge point that is missing from the connection. Religions of the world worshiping the same one God, there is only one belief that is different from them all. And that is the true belief that stems from the set-apart nation of ancient Israel that led to salvation only through Yahusha, the Messiah. And so what we have is all the religions of the world, including Christianity, they're all against the way. And that's the division. Now, there are divisions within certain religions, like in Islam with the Sunnis versus the Shiites. But overall, the conflict of religions of the world are divided from the way and every other faith in this world. That's the division. Now listen, yes, you heard me right. I do include Christianity in with all the other faiths. And maybe that bothers you. But understand, I include Christianity in the word religions because if you understood the history that has stemmed from Catholicism and then moved on to the Protestants, they still are the same tares from the same foundation. And that's what Christianity is. This is something I have also discussed in depth in the Hijacker series. Those that follow and believe in the God of the Bible, they are the only ones in the world that can say that the God that they believe in is not Lucifer. And maybe you ask, well, how can you be so sure? Let me answer this very simply. If you take the beliefs that the other religions believe in, there are always many similar characteristics into the character of their God. For instance, with much of them, there's no penalty for not following him. He lets you pretty much do what you want without consequence. Sin is not clearly defined. There is no final judgment, and their hope is in a Messiah-like figure to come who is very different from the Messiah of the Bible.
So we see here that most of the religions of the world, while they appear to be different and they appear different, but they're not different, right? Because they don't talk about sin. They don't talk about morality in terms of that you are going to be, castigated by God for the sins of the world, what you're doing. So much of what is happening in our world today is our religions that are just saying, if you do good works, if you're a good person, then you can have eternal life. You don't have to live without sin. You live with how you want to live and everything is okay. The way how God has designed the world, however, is not that way. God's word is the only word that tells we have to get rid of sin, but we can't get rid of it ourselves, right? That is what it's saying, that God has to help us. Christ has to help us to get rid of our foibles or weaknesses, right? And that is what it says. Now, when we talk about living in a world where we can do and live whatever we want to do. So if you want to be a thief, if you want to be a criminal, if you want to be a drunkard, live the way how you're living. Once you're being nice and once you don't have to go into prison, that's fine, right? But is that the way God wants us to live? Absolutely not. And that is why our civilization is decaying as we are currently seeing it right now. Let us look at what some of you are saying, and then we're going into why they're going to have a one world government. The Son of Mary, I think I read this, also wants to be worshipped as the TMH, and he also claims in Isaiah 14 to have a throne in heaven like Lucifer, aka Morning Star. Yes, ultimately, the mark of the beast is worship. Right, is worship. And that is what we have to understand, whether we like it or not, whether you're atheist or Muslim or Christian, at the end of the day, there is going to be a mark and you have to worship. In the same way that we had a pandemic in which we had to take a V, that's the same thing that they are going to design for all members of this world. Now, if you don't do it, consequences will follow. Now, all followers of the Son of Mary have the same exact foundation. So Christians are all together as one body of Christ, that is Christianity. No, that's not true, right? Christians are not together, have never been together, right? And that is why we're saying you had the Protestant Reformation, in which some Christians call themselves Protestant, protesting against what the Catholics were doing, and they moved away from that. But let's look into another story where the Catholic Church is saying here in a Catholic Care, and they're asking why World Religion Day matters so much. They had a World Religion Day, and that was celebrated this year. Let me share that piece with you, and let's go through why they're telling us that we need a one world government, a one world religion, if we are to move forward in this world. Because our world is decaying, we have no values, and people are concerned as to where we're going, and they're moving us, as it were, into that. Let me have it to the stage here. Are you seeing it? Yeah, you should be able to see it right now. Okay, so let's go over there, and the why World Religion Day matters so much. That's what they're asking, and this was written on January 14th, 2024. When you believe in a higher power, whether divine or secular, it gives you a feeling of control in the sense that life is inherently meaningful. Regardless of color, creed, or culture, the history of humanity is a history of searching for something unifying and timeless that adds meaning and richness to life. For centuries, for many, religion has served that need. We can't really argue with them about that first paragraph. Why? Many rich people and people who are educated and people who are successful according to world standards, right? They are all looking for some meaning in life, which many of them cannot find. Catholics, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and Jews may all follow different religions and practice different beliefs, but they are universally bonded by a common theme, their faith. Is that true? Faith is the light that never goes out, the beacon in the darkest night, the anchor in the stormiest seas, and shelter in the fiercest storm. Faith is what gives us the courage to do the right thing without reward or recognition, to stand stoic and unwavering in the face of scorn, and to hold fast to our beliefs and convictions when pushed to the limits of our endurance. Faith is the consolation of the lonely, the balm for a wounded soul, the strength that can turn in any tide, and the voice inside that urges us to carry on when all seems hopeless and lost. And that's true. Faith has the courage of a lion, the might of a mountain, and burns as fierce as the brightest star. It is a bottomless well of inspiration and nourishment we can all draw upon, and it is the very essence of World Religion Day. So they're telling us that the world now needs to be united. The world now needs to be united because people are losing what? Hope. They don't feel like the politicians are doing exactly what they have been sent to office to do. They're not, and we all know that. But it's deliberate. It's not that they want to solve the problem, it's that they have created the problem, the demon, right? And they're now telling us that they have to solve that which they have created, and they have given us materialism as the balm, right, to make us happy, worldly success, right? Go and educate yourself, right? And you get married, get your car, your house, right? And do these things. And when these things do not come, and lots of people are realizing that they are not gaining these things, they lose hope. So what they're going to do now, they're going to say, well, people are immoral, people have lost hope. So we have to impose upon them right now a false religion that is, it's not a religion that is true, but a false religion so that we can, let me stop, did I not stop? Yeah, so that we can actually get them back on track. Right? That is what they're doing, and that is what we have to understand. Now, let's look back at some of what the guy was still sharing with us, the one world religion. He has a lot that he's sharing that we need to understand and we need to look back on. I think he's a very intelligent young man and a black person too, right? So you can be black and you can be religious. Nothing is wrong with that, as some of us think that, to be black means that you're not religious, or to be educated mean that you should not have some amount of religiosity. So let's go back to what he's saying. He has a lot of excellent.
I am so sure that there is a difference between the God of the other religions and the God of the Bible, because Yahuwah and his word, his doctrine, his laws, his prophecy, his love, his ways, all that does not match up at all with any of the other world religions, while the other world religions all match up and align with each other. And also, we are told there is only one way to our Creator, and that's through belief in Yahushua the Messiah, who the world later transliterated his name to Jesus Christ. The only way to our Father is through belief in his Son, and it's not some generic belief only by his name, because a Muslim will tell you that they believe in Jesus too. There are not many paths to him. There is one narrow gate that we all must walk through, and that is aligning completely with his word without addition or subtraction. And so that is the explanation of the division.
All right. So what they're telling us essentially that we can be Christians and we can be Muslim and you can be Hindu and everything is okay with that one world religion. So they're moving us into a religion that they're telling us that it can be interfaith. So be whatever you want to be, Christ will accept you. But that's not what the Bible says. It says that there is only one way. And one way to God, and that is through Christ. You can't come through Krishna, you can't come through Allah, you can't come through you can't come through materialism, right? You only can come through Christ. But the one world religion, don't be fooled, it is multi-religion, what we call polar world. So we can say a multipolar religious world where all the members of the world will not subscribe to one religion per se, but they will subscribe to the religion that the global elites ascribe that they should actually worship and to adhere to. Now we have Trevor. Good afternoon, Trevor. The video presented is on point. Yes, it is really on point, and I think he is a very intelligent young man. One world religion is equal Christianity. Christians will set up the mark of the beast to force the son of Mary worship on people, or no buy, no sell. Well, it's not only going to be Christians, it's going to be, as we're saying here, an ecumenical movement. And that is what we mean. And for those of you who don't understand the word ecumenism, it means coming together. So you will have the people in India and who might be Hindus. You'll have people in Africa and they have their African religions. And if those of you want to study more on that, please go to Vatican II that the Roman Catholic Church had in 1962 thereabout, in which they themselves were now saying, in order to win them over to us, we have to join them. So the Roman Catholic Church says, if somebody practices voodoo, we'll tell them, yeah, nothing is wrong with that. If somebody practices obya, then yeah, we will worship with them. If somebody's Muslim, and there's a lot of interfaith dialogues happening right now that we're not hearing about, are happening, have happened, and deals have been made where religions are actually coming together. So this is nothing like a figment of the imagination. They're warring, and we're watching the wars, but at the same time, they are uniting the world through religions. Now, why do you think they're in the Middle East? The Muslim religion and the people who practice Muslim, just like we're saying Christian, when you practice the religion and you're convicted, it's very difficult to crack that nut. And the Muslims are one of those religions where it's not going to be easy for them to crack that nut. So what they're doing there, they have staged wars. So they have staged wars in the Middle East. Right now we're seeing with Iran, we saw with Iraq and Syria and all of the other countries in the Middle East, because they want to crack the nut of Islam so that they will eventually accede to the one world religion. Because if they can do that, then they will be able to have the world, be in that sort of totalitarian state. Remember now that we're not living in a world where people are trying to, work for better living and improve our lot. They're not doing that. What they want us to do is to be obedient boys and girls. And in order for us to do that, we have to know that we have to be religious and we listen to daddy, right? Because that is what Papa, the Pope, tells you to do. That is that which you have to do. Now, Trevor is saying, but in essence, rebuilding the Tower of Babel, which is a system, is what the Sustainable Development Goals, did you hear what he said? By the UN is about. Absolutely. And I have a video here, which I'm going to show you right now, as you're saying, this is why they divide us, but say they unite us. Very well said, Trevor. And I do have a video here. Since he mentioned that point, why not go right to it so that we can discuss that point that he has raised. Absolutely, absolutely, 100%, 1,000% in agreement with what you have just said. So let's get to that video in terms of putting it on the screen. Please like and share the video so that we can get other people on the platform. And this is the UN's Sustainable Development Goal, which is for the 21st century, that they're building the system. And one of these days, we're going to look at the United Nations for you to see that United Nations
development. It is the inventory and control plan. Inventory and control of all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all food, all energy, all information, and all human beings in the world. And this is a plan that was agreed to by 179 nations back in 1992. It's a United Nations plan. It's called the Agenda for the 21st Century. And so many of us around the world think that sustainable development, it just sounds so great. Isn't it about recycling and creative reuse and creating energy and food resources for everyone? And the answer is no, it really is not. It's about moving populations into city centers, concentrated city centers, and clearing them out of the rural areas. It's constructed of non-governmental organizations, corporations, and government in order to dictate and regulate what it is that happens around the world. Regionalization is the stepping stone to globalization, and globalization is the standardization of all systems. All systems have to be brought into harmony in order to control them all. And the goal of Agenda 21 is one world government and total control from a central unit. The principles are public-private partnerships, which is fascism. And this is how it's implemented on the ground, is through this joining together between corporations, non-governmental organizations, and governments in order to cut out the actual individual, your voter, and instead to take that to a level where we literally cannot penetrate. This is a corporatocracy. It's a totalitarian state being developed right now all over the world. While we are moving towards the end game, we are not there. And this is the opportunity that all of us have now to stand up, to speak out. We are free, and we need to continue to be free. And I do believe that we will win, but we have to become aware that there is a fight.
Right. Do you think most of the world's population think that this is a fight? No. What they think is a fight is right now reparations, right? They think that the world is going to listen to Black people and we are divided and everybody wants, a place at the table, and that they're going to give us that place at the table. And that is not their agenda. Their agenda at the moment is to unite the entire world together under a false religion, because that is the only way that they can unite the world, right? The world cannot be united on the science. We saw what happened during the pandemic. Even though they attempted and they tried, the world was still not united. They tried, right? They give them their credit. They tried. But under a one world religion, people will be more coerced. Because the entire world is going to say that, and they're going to perform miracles too, So watch out for AI and the use of these things, and they're going to frighten the daylights out of you. And you're going to think that, yeah, we need to come together because some God is creating all of these storms. Some God is creating all of these, fires that are happening in the world. Some God is creating all of these magical events that you are going to see before your eyes, and you're going to be wondering, yeah, we might have to, because you're going to lose your lives. People are going to lose a lot. Many of us are going to die. We're going to lose our properties because of the natural disasters and all the things that are going to happen, some of which they are going to engineer. And then when they now strike fear in your hearts, then people will give in and say that we have to worship. But what you're going to worship is a false God. Right? And that is why you have to know the true religion from false religion. People talk against religion. I don't talk against religion. I talk against true religion, false religion. I talk against false science. There's nothing wrong with religion. There's nothing wrong with science. It is when it's falsified, right, that it becomes a curse. So religion can be a curse. Science can be a curse. Education can be a curse. So it's not what you do, it's how you do it That which is true education is a blessing. That which is true science is a blessing. That which is true religion, as it gives us purpose and a sense of belonging, that is also a blessing. Yeah, but then once we are further divided, as Trevor is saying, we won't fight against it, because this is what unity is supposed to look like and was sold to us, correct? And that is why they have to impose it upon us. We will never be united, you know. And that's what we have to understand. We will never be united. It will be imposed upon us, just like the vaccines. So everybody will have to agree whether or not it's true. And that's why some people, even though they know the mark of the beast is wrong, will accept it. Just like some people, some doctors, some scientists knew that the vaccines were wrong, but they still accepted it because that is what they are told to do. Yeah, and then we have here, and by the way, they will indeed use Christianity, etc., by saying they believe in Jesus too in all other forms of religion. Correct. Remember, coexist is also a sustainable development goal dealing with religion. Right. And if you know and understand the United Nations, as she was suggesting here in the video, in the clipping, that the United Nations is not political, it's more religious than political. But people think it's political, and that is why they are running after reparations and think the United Nations is true and sincere in presenting reparations to us. But as we studied yesterday, that the United Nations was actually founded under the realm of colonialism. When the United Nations was actually founded, many African countries and Caribbean countries were still under British and other forms of colonialism. So it's not there to free us, it is there to what? To enslave us. Right? And that is what they have, these very nice sounding words, the United Nations Sustainable Development. And we think that it is going to develop us, but it's going to bring us into further poverty and control. Now, we have King Charles just started his move toward making it public. That is where they are taking things. Correct. And Prince Charles was this Prince of Sustainable Development. Remember that Prince Charles is also a very keen Muslim. He pretends that he's a Christian, but he is Muslim. I think that is his religion. But because the court, the palace, Buckingham Palace, and that, you know, they have always been practicing Anglicans. The Church of England is the head of state in England, right? He pretends to be a practicing Anglican, but his real connection is with Islam, right? That is if you read about King Charles III, you will understand that. All will come together under Christ and receive the mark. Well, they come together under a false religion, right? Under a false brand of religion. That is what they're going to come under, and that's what the mark of the beast is going to be. It's not going to be true religion. It's going to be a false religion that suggests that they are gods, right? Because they are enthroning themselves as gods, putting themselves in the place of God. That is what we call the Antichrist. That's what it's called, the Antichrist. It's not Christ. It's going to be the Antichrist, but they will use Christ as the originator of it, definitely. The American government vowed to continue Charlie Kirk's work and enforce the mark, which Erica Kirk, linked to the Son of Mary, said you should mark yourselves in your forehead with Christ. And, you know, the whole matter of this Charlie Kirk thing was something very religious, if we remember what is happening, but also very dark, a dark form of religiosity, right? And that is what we have to understand. But if we're not anchored and grounded in truth, we too are going to be deceived. Because these guys have what? All the machinations. I tell you, put into AI. AI can tell you everything about the Bible. AI can tell you everything about the Quran. AI can tell you everything about the Hindu, you know, sort of scriptures, whatever they read. I forgot the name of that text, right? So the fact of the matter is that AI is going to argue with you, and AI is going to tell you that they have more information than you, and the ordinary man and woman cannot quote scriptures and from the Quran as AI can. So many of us are going to be deceived. Just like we were deceived under the vaccination campaign because you had all of these data and everything against you and you believed it, didn't you? They looked nice, didn't they? Right? But it was not true data. Now, President Trump set up through executive order the Office of Anti-Christian Bias, right? Director Reverend Paula White to go after anyone who speaks against Christ. And this is a false religion because Christ is not about what? Imposing Christianity on the world. The Bible says that you should choose ye this day whom you will serve. Right? It didn't say that you have to serve him, but of course consequences follow eventually on the day of judgment if you do not follow Christ. But in this world, you have a choice, and that choice is whatever you choose. And Michael Smith, you're correct, Michael Smith, you're making some very good points. Project 2025, 26 Christian nationalists say that those who do not submit to Christ will be annihilated. You're correct. And these are things that we don't see, Michael, that there's a war on true religion right now in the White House and in the world at large. It's a war. And so the war, as the Bible says, is not against flesh and blood really, but against what? Principalities and power. So we are in more of a spiritual warfare than we are seeing the likes of the physical warfare that we're seeing being waged around the world. But they have to distract us. And I'm not saying that these wars are not real wars. They are real wars. But the fact of the matter, we have to be what? We have to look at all sides. So we have to look at the political side, the economic side, the spiritual side, because if not so, we are going to be deceived. And we're already deceived. The majority of the world is deceived. Now, so we go back to Trevor. While they failed in the pandemic to capture us all, they were successful in proving how ungodly and faithless people are, correct, and how easily people replace their God to one which justifies their current actions. Absolutely. And many people, by the way, lost faith in their churches because their churches would not help them when they needed like letters of excuse not to take the V. So many people lost hope because they say, my God, I went to my pastor, I went to my elder, and I asked them to give me a letter of, excuse for not taking, because that it defies my conscience, it defies my faith, and the church actually let them down, saying that, well, everybody's doing it, so why not do it? So at the end of the day, even your church that you think is following the Bible, right, or whatever faith you belong to, they will also give you up. They will sacrifice you on the altar of sacrifice. So you have to know what you believe in and not to believe in a pastor or a church or people. You have to believe in whomever you believe in. I'm not telling you now to believe in something that I believe in. I'm telling you to have faith in whatever you believe in. Okay? And you have to have firm conscience, right? And you have a faith that is immobile, that it's unshakable. That's what I want to say. Unshakable faith in your God. Now, remember, God is a title. So if you all bow and pray to God, it can be anything, including the devil himself. Correct? Because everybody wants to be God. But the fact of the matter, we are talking about the God of the Bible. And that's the distinction it needs to be made, that we're talking about the God of the Bible that is a God. And yes, it's a title. God is a title. But as you're saying, everybody is calling themselves God now, right? So the fact of the matter is that we have to be extremely careful. Let's look at another video here that I thought was interesting, coming from YouTube, in which he's also explaining to us the whole matter of where we are going with this one world religion, or people are saying other things that they, let me take off this advertisement. That's one thing with the YouTube advertisements plague these videos. Trying to get this off. So as soon as I get it off, I'll put it up on the screen. Yeah. So let me now get it up and going so that you can see what we are talking about. The role of religion in the coming one world government. So let me get this now for you. Share. And then we are going to look at it at the moment. All right, so boom, and get it. Okay, so let me put up the volume, turn on the volume, and we can get it.
Because the United States is undoing its own global order.
There's a way to undermine global governance. aiming for a single world government and religion. Many miss the ties between current events and the influence of its founding teachings and pagan origins. Connecting these dots is essential for understanding the unfolding end times prophecies.
All right, so let me go up because they're going to have music here, and I don't want that YouTube.
Particularly with the theft of Venezuela and threats to take over other countries. It was doing these things before, but not out in the open like this. It goes on to say that in recent years, a new multipolar world forces of power is its territory, its economy, the large oceans on its east and west, and much smaller powers on its north and south. So, what is Trump trying to do right now? He's controlling those smaller powers. It says the U.S. had a global military presence in the previous bipolar and unipolar order. But the cost of this imperial overstretch has prompted Washington to shift the cost burden to a new militarization in Europe and East Asia, where most countries now aim to increase military spending. What we see happening right now are these world leaders flexing. They're flexing their muscles, and it's creating a sense of instability. But they also need allies. Now, that's not working out so well for the United States because Trump is alienating most of its allies. So the author is saying that there will be constant jostling as these major powers seek alliances while still trying to deal with their own domestic issues. His conclusion is that all world orders come to an end. The hope is the old one is doing so with the most important piece of the puzzle, religion. Bible prophecy is clear that the beast will require worship in the last days. So all of the mounting conflicts are going to lead to a universal religion, one that will control governing powers as well as the way people worship. The question is, what will they use as a model? They're going to use the framework of an empire that many Europeans still regard as one of the most successful civilizations in history, the Roman Empire. This says the Roman Empire's success can be attributed to its effective control over religion and government, which allowed it to maintain order and prosperity across its vast territories. So many believe that the Roman Empire is ascending from the ashes, per se. However, the Roman Catholic Church has been the embodiment of the Roman Empire. It's seen as a religious institution, but it still retains the political power of the empire. It chose to restrain itself, waiting for the right time to make its move. We're talking about the legs of iron from Daniel's vision. Let's look at this from Bible Tools. It's talking about what the Bible says about the revival of the Roman Empire. It says, when Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that he was the head of gold, it shows us a biblical principle that a king in prophecy represents the entire kingdom. In verses 39 through 40, the words after you indicates four successive world ruling empires from the time of the Chaldean Empire of Nebuchadnezzar until the return of Christ and the establishment of the kingdom of the Most High. World history from a Gentile perspective, beginning with Nebuchadnezzar and coming all the way down through the various kingdoms until the image is struck on the foot by the stone. This prophecy brings us right into our present time, the time of the end, the time when we can expect that the stone, sometime in the not too distant future, will strike this image on the feet. We can look for that last empire represented by the feet and toes to exist today, or either be coming together or will shortly be coming together. So let's pause right there.
Okay, so
Both
we
things are
can
true.
stop here for a while. And what is very interesting about that biblical language is the whole matter of the iron and the clay. The Bible says that cannot be merged. So even though they're actually trying to unite the entire world, they won't be able to do it. But the fact of the matter, it is going to be violent. They're going to try to do it, just like how they tried to do the COVID pandemic thing. But it will result in the deaths of hundreds of millions of people whilst they're trying to do it, because it's going to be authoritarian, and they're going to tell us that they have to do it, and if they don't do it, they can kill you. The law is going to give them that sort of justification to kill you. Right, so this is not something that, even though they're not going to accomplish it, we're going to say, well, they're not going to accomplish it, I can be happy. No. Now, based on what we're hearing about Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Roman Empire, are we going back to China being an empire? No. Are we going to go back to Africa being an empire? It's not going to happen. Are we going back to England being an empire? No, it's not going to happen. Right, we are now in that section of the toes of Daniel, in which the next thing to happen is that stone that is going to hit all of the body, right from the head to the toes of Daniel, and crush it. All kingdoms of this world, right, are going to be crushed. Now, as she talked about the Vatican and Pope Leo, there's something here that he has, that a video that he made, or that was made on him, about him and what he's doing to unite the faith. Let me see if I can get it on my screen, and we are going to look at it right now, because we have to get our facts together, and we've got to begin to think, wow, this is exciting times, people, and we think that we are just living in times of where we just listen to some news and we just go. But that's not what the world is about. The world is much deeper than that. It's exciting, but it's not exciting what they're doing, but it's exciting the history and prophecy coming together. But people are so much caught up in their deception that they're going to be deceived.
I accept your invitation to walk together, to listen and to speak, and together to find the way for humanity in this time of artificial intelligence. What a great sign of hope it is that with our differences, we can listen to one another. This interchange clearly bespeaks the gravity of the moment, as well as confidence that together we can discern the major questions of our time, and so the future of humanity. In a special way, I'd like to thank Mr. Ola for accepting our invitation. In turn, in the name of the Church, I accept your invitation to walk together, to listen and to speak, and together to find the way for humanity in this time of artificial intelligence. Okay. What a great...
So we are seeing here where they're moving towards artificial intelligence, right? That is what is going to unite the world. The world does not speak one language. But do you know that in China, for example, that they have a system like a pair of glasses that they can use, and you can look at the glasses and it translates whatever language you speak in. So AI is going to be that sort of middleman, if you want to call it, that will unite the world under the one world government that they're trying to set up for us. Why this is not coming again? Wow, this sometimes when you're trying to get this, let me see if I can come out of here. I don't know what's going on here with Right. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that. I had to get out. All right. So we're seeing where AI is going to be that thing that is going to draw everybody together. Right. We're going to all come together under AI because AI is going to be the new link to the new world order and to the people that is going to control everything in the world. Now let's listen to Michael. So what you're saying. President Trump on Sunday, May 17th, 2026. Trevor, did I? Oh, I think, let me go back to I think, President Trump on Sunday, May 17, 26, rededicated America to Christ, declaring officially America to be a Christian nation again. Yeah, and he is, remember now that Trump's presidency is the most Catholic presidency in the history of the United States. The Trump's presidency has the most Catholic cardinals and people of Catholic faith. The Mario, what's his name? The Secretary of State, right? The Secretary of State is Catholic, and many of Pete Hegseth, all of these guys are Catholic, and they're vicious. And every time they're meeting with the Pope, right? They're always meeting with the Pope when there's a major decision to be made, whether it's the war on Venezuela or it's a war in Iran right now. All of them have to meet with the Pope. The Pope has to direct whatever decision that they're making right there in Washington, D.C. Remember, God's the title. I think we had it, and to pray. I think we did have this already. And then we have President Trump, who has his own Bible, said that he must bring Christ into the homes of Americans to make America great again. Remember now that Trump is not the one really formulating these policies. He doesn't know his Bible. He doesn't read the Bible, but he has bigger guys, right? Bigger fish, if you will, who are making these decisions on his behalf. Right? But Trump does not care about religion. He doesn't care about Christianity. Trump is just using his office to do the bidding of the global elites, right? Some very powerful global elites right there in Washington, D.C. And please make sure that you understand also that the people who are responsible for technology, they are likewise religious. So very much of the world that we think is not religious, or Freemasonry is religious. The Illuminati, religious, but they practice pagan religion. So when you are there and your mind is so stoic and you believe that religion is something that you should not even think about, right? The people that rule you and rule over you and are going to enslave you are religious. Just bear that in mind. You might not want to hear it now, but when it happens, you are going to remember that, wow, that guy on that podcast, he was saying it and I did not listen to him. And right now it's happening to me. Now, Michael submitted all over the world, the shout is Christ. Christ is King. The crowning act of deception will be Christ walking the earth, receiving worship with all of his followers or worshipers, marked with his name in their forehead. Now, remember now, Michael Smith, that's a false Christ. The devil himself is who's going to do it. This is not Christ who is going to do it, ladies and gentlemen, right? It is the devil who is going to impersonate, right, Christ and come and say that he's Christ, because angels have the power. All angels, whether good or bad angels, to transition themselves into personalities that are not really the ones that they have the power to impersonate. So they can come like your dead folks, and they can reveal and talk like them, walk like them, smell like them, right? So that's why you have to be very careful when you say you see your mother or you're talking to your ancestor. Notice that in recent times, we've been having, particularly black people, people are talking about their ancestors, and they saw their ancestors, and their ancestors revealed that to them. Be careful. Be careful of ancestral worship. And many of you are doing that, and you're going to do that to your own defeat, because the devil doesn't like you and his angels. They want to kill you. They want to get rid of all of us if they could. If had it not been for the restraining order of God, remember now that only God can restrain the devil. Nobody else can restrain him, because he's a powerful creature. Okay? No other person. With all of what you see here, they can't restrain him. And if you argue with him, he's going to win, because he has more education, far more superior than the likes of any human being. Now, Democrat Representative Cleaver said a prayer to Brahma, etc., and ended it by saying a man and a woman, okay, not a man. Interesting foolishness, but it was politically correct not to hurt people's feelings, watered right down. And that's the whole purpose, Trevor, that we don't want to hurt people's feelings. I remember when I was doing the podcast some years ago, don't talk about religion, don't connect it with what is happening in the world. And they moved on because they think my doing that suggests that I am this simplistic narrator or commentator. But if you're not religious, Malcolm X was religious, right? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was religious. It didn't make them less of an intellectual. It didn't make them less of being able to understand. In fact, they had a superior knowledge to what many of us declare who are non-religious have, right? They had a superior knowledge of what is happening in the political realm and economic realm and could articulate it with a higher level of cadence than we are today doing. Because we don't know how to think, if we're not in any way religious, how are you going to think? Where did you come from? Where are you going? Science can't ask that, but religion can, if it's the right religion. Now, Christians never saw it coming. Deception is everywhere in these latter days, and sad state of affairs indeed. Correct. It's sad because people don't want to learn. People don't want to read. We read sometimes, but we read what we want to read, and we listen to what we want to hear and not what needs to be heard. Also, don't forget the Pope proposing a universal day of peace, that he is a man of peace, and asked for it to be Sunday. Absolutely. Do with that information that you will. And recently, Trump also recognized Sunday for two major events. So first of all, they were recognizing the day of the Jews, which is Sabbath. But what they want to do is to say, well, let us recognize the Jewish Sabbath first, and then we will usher into worshiping the Sunday as the Sabbath. And by the way, that is going to be the mark of the beast. Sunday worship is going to be the mark of the beast because, the Roman Catholic Church says that is the only mark which shows her authority in the world, that she is the principal, she's the mother church. So all the other churches, whether you're Baptist or you're Anglican and you're worshiping on Sunday, you are actually following the mark of the Roman Catholic papacy, because there's no way in the Bible, and the Catholic Church has said it, nowhere in the Bible suggests that people should worship on Sunday. Now, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't worship God every day, but God has a special day of worship. And that's what we have to understand. And many people will say, what is wrong with a day of worship? Any day we should worship God every day. Yes. The same thing I could ask you in the beginning when Eve went and she ate the forbidden fruit along with her husband, what happened? So God is strict on commandments. Whatever he says we have to do, or if you don't do it, then consequences follow. I say that God's a dictator, and he's one, but he's a benevolent dictator. He knows what is best. He is the only one, because he is the creator. He is the only one that knows what is best for humanity. So we have to do what he says. And if you don't do what he says, consequences will fall. Okay? And that is and it's always consequences that will be. But let us look at our body. Our bodies, if we don't take care of our bodies, what happens? They are destroyed. You don't eat well, what happens? You're going to die, all right? Or you're going to catch a disease. So God knows what is best. And that's what we call faith. Faith is not blind, Faith is just, if your doctor says to you, don't eat this, don't eat that, you have confidence in your doctor. You believe that he has the knowledge, he has studied, and you think that he is instructing you the right thing to do. And if you move away from what he says, you believe that you can die or your situation will get worse. It's the same thing with God. Why don't we believe him? You have to have faith in everything, right? You have to have faith in everything. You have faith. Are you going to live to see tomorrow? We might not. But we're having some faith that we're going to live to see tomorrow. All right. So stop this nonsense about faith is stupidness and whatever, because all of us have to some degree exercise faith. But faith in whom and faith in what? Great. Welcome back, Afro-Grenadian Ambassador. Facts, bro, Andrew. As much as we would like to see Africa as one, sadly, it won't happen. It won't happen again. And even China, I'm not adding Great Britain. Those who like Great Britain, I see Trump beginning and he's talking about Great Britain. And when Great Britain, was in her years of as an empire, right? But she's not going to return to that era. They're not going to return, right? Watching the media and believing it, Trevor is saying, will trump most of the people's beliefs. It's all manipulation. Why worship me? I'm a human like you, but here is my creation, which you can worship by my algorithm. Well said. Well said. But human beings like to worship what they can see, and that was paganism. Remember now, the children of Israel, when God took them out of Israel, He performed some miracles before them that you're really wondering if He did all of what He did for them. They should say, wow, I have to serve this God. Do you know that having done all of that for them, they still wanted a God that they could see? Human beings, for some reason, want something that they can look and see, even when that thing is dead. So if it's a cow, it could be a dead cow. It could be an orange, right? If that is what you have set up in a car, a machine, AI, human beings want some man-made, invention, right, to suggest that this is what they need to worship. That is what human beings do. Don't forget Marco Rubio, right, had a meeting with the Pope sometime, that's Stephen Knight, ago, and we have yet to know what went on in that meeting. You never know what goes on in the meeting with the Pope. Never. They're not going to tell you. And in fact, before Maduro was taken out of office, they had a meeting in which the Secretary of the Vatican called Washington, D.C. and told them what they needed to do. So he was behind Maduro being captured too. Trump could not do it without the Pope of Rome dictating to him what he and how he should go about it. Remember now that the Venezuelan state is run by the Roman Catholic papacy. Most of these Latin American states, whether Dominican Republic, Colombia, Peru, all of them, their politicians have to obey the Roman Catholic papacy. And if they don't, they will be thrown out of office. You have to understand that, because wherever the Roman Catholic Church is, it believes in the combination of politics and religion, the merger of politics and religion. It does also believe that it is superior to all politics, all politicians, because the Vatican is the reigning, or should be the reigning, the Pope of Rome should be the reigning monarch. Right? And so that is what you have to understand. We must remember, Afro-Grenadian is saying, and understand when the Antichrist comes, he will be a very religious figure, his greatest deception ever. Absolutely, because the world, as I was saying, Afro-Grenadian, is that the world in which we live is going to be so immoral, and is already immoral. But what is going to happen now, based on the lack of morality, we're going to see lots of natural disasters occurring. They are going to then link the natural disasters, right? Because cities are going to be destroyed. Many cities around the world are going through wars, through natural disasters, and through lots of other disasters that will come upon the world. Having those natural disasters, they are going to logically say, which sounds logical, that because of the state of immorality, that we have to go back to religion. We must go back to where we become, because we are immoral. Don't get me wrong. We can't deny that fact. But who created that for the most part? Who sort of, weakened faith in people? You go to the education system, if you talk about the Bible, or, nobody wants to listen to you. But that's my belief. Well, what's your belief? That's fine. Why don't we have the Bible and the Quran and the book of the Hindus in school? Let them read it. And why don't we have the theory of evolution right beside the theory of creation? Let them be exposed to that. That is true learning. It's not just going to school and studying what the secular science. Let them study something that opposes the secular science so that they can think and they can choose which one they think is rational in their minds, right? But what they want to do, they want to brainwash us and say, this is the education you must have. And if you don't agree, then, you're stupid. Trevor is saying Freemasonry does the same thing. It's just it's being done publicly now. Right. All Masons coming to the lodge are asked to believe in a God, and when they gather, they worship the one they call us the great architect. And by the way, I understand too, Trevor, that the highest level of Freemasonry, that it is the Quran, that is Allah, that you see when you get to the higher level. So what Freemasonry does, right? And listen to what is happening at the junior levels in Freemasonry. You believe that if you're Muslim, then you're Muslim. If you're Christian, then be Christians. If you're Hindu, then be Hindu. But when you get to the highest degrees, you see that you're actually worshiping Allah, the devil. Right? Speak to people who are 33 degree Freemasons, and they will let you know that they're literally communicating with the devil. It has nothing to do with philanthropic deeds that they start you out with at the junior levels. And that's why people are deceived, because they think that, oh yeah, they're doing a lot of philanthropic. The same thing with the junior sororities and the fraternities in our universities. Let's talk about how corrupt they are too, right? And how religious, how spiritual what they're doing, paganistic, coming from these Greek fraternities and sororities. Right, but that is the way how they get some connection to jobs, and because their sisters or their brother is there, and people just are deceived by these things, right? But when they get into the study of the Bible, they realize that this is nothing but paganism, and some of them stop it because they realize that it conflicts with what the Bible says about worshiping other people. Do you see people who are fraternity? They belong to sororities, and what they have to do, and the lines that they have to form, and they have to cross over the, what do you call it now, the crossing, whatever. That was everything they're doing is what paganism, the pagan culture did, right? The government is going to force people to worship Christ on Sunday, the day in honor of Christ, to rise from the dead on the third day for salvation, which is not found in Torah. Correct. And God did not ask anybody to for his resurrection, to commemorate his resurrection. Right? He never asked us to do that. In fact, his burial and his resurrection should be commemorated with the communion service. Just before he actually was killed, before he was murdered, before he was crucified, he performed the communion service. And that was what was to commemorate his death and his burial and his resurrection until he returns. All occultic practices done in the dark are being sold and called by different names in the public as modern and fun. Right. It's why the lodges are more open now. The people sacrifice and sell themselves. And some of them are Christians too. And they come to church and they are elders, and people put them into high positions because of their status in the society. But it's not biblical. Fraternities and sororities are not biblical, right? They are not also, aligned with good values, if I should say. And we have heard of sometimes they're killing each other. We know of the hazing that they do to be a part of that sort of situation, of that secret, fraternity. You have to haze students, and some of them die. Right, some of them die. In fact, when I was teaching a student at Howard University, he's saying that one of his fraternity, when he was signing up for it, and they were going through that sort of hazing process, that they brought him out to a very far distant part of Maryland and asked him to walk all the way from that part of Maryland right back to Washington, D.C. Who did that? Wicked. Why would you do your brother like that's a big, massive, chunk of roads to walk on, right? And to return. I don't know how he returned, if he eventually got some money or he actually boomed a ride and got back to Washington, D.C. at Howard University. But this is the way how they behave and what they do to get people to become brothers and sisters. Does that make any sense? Do we have to become brothers and sisters and you have to beat me, you have to haze me, you have to all? No. That's not healthy. Michael Smith, nowhere in Torah does the Creator, Yah, himself, through his prophets, tells anyone to worship the Son of Mary on any day. So we have here, I can't disagree, bro, Andrew. According to the scriptures, the mark of the beast is not about a worship but the condition of the heart, God will reject those whose heart was full of evil. Yes, but it also has to do with worship, because the Bible says that. It says that those who do not worship will be. We can go back to Revelation 13. Let's go there and we can look at what it says in terms of the mark. Is it Revelation 13 verse 12? Let me just check to see that verse, so that we can be clear on that. It's going to be worship. Anything that has to do with religion, by the way, so we say one word, religion, is worship, right? Anything, whether it is fraternity, sorority, anything that has to do with religion is worship. Music, sports is worship. So that is what it might not be worship in the traditional sense of how we think it is, but it's a false worship, right? It's going to be a false system of worship. Is it 12? And yeah, Revelation 13 verse 12, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship, right? So it's to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. So yes, it has to do with heart, because worship also has to do with the heart. It's heart thing. Whatever when you worship somebody, it has to do with your heart. And that is why God says that we should worship him in spirit and in truth, because it should be coming from our heart. But many people won't be worshiping this system from their heart. They'll be worshiping it just because they're afraid and that they're coerced to do it. And that's the two different things, and that's the world's religions, false religions are going to, the one world religion is going to coerce everybody to worship. Just like in the pandemic, the false science that they built that thing on coerced the entire world to actually take a V. Having a definite day is a command, but people are fighting against rules, and unfortunately Christianity, etc., makes it easy. But that is by saying Christ died for you already, do what you will, read for yourself. Yeah, but the fact of the matter is that in the same way that, as we see during the pandemic, where many people they're going to tell you can't buy or sell. Right? So it's not that they're going to come to your house. Remember now, in the pandemic, for one, there were supermarkets that I could not go to. And I had to hide when I was going to the supermarket because I was not vaccinated. I had to hide. I had to move fast. I was behaving like a criminal. They treated me like a criminal because if I didn't have the vaccine passport, you could not enter a supermarket. Now, think about it. We have to eat. And these laws are going to be much more draconian because they have all now more sophisticated technologies to watch you. So I won't be able to hide. The second time around, during the mark of the beast, you will not be able to hide. Because first of all, the currency is going to be a one world currency. So you won't be able to shop online. You won't be able to do anything. They lock your card down. Right? And then you can't eat, you can't move about. So people are going to just give in and say, yeah. So it's not about that they're going to try to, they're not going to enforce it, but they're going to enforce it through coercion. Because you can be faithful to a day, but that's the whole point. It's not being faithful to a day, it's being faithful to what God says. But in doing that, you're faithful to him. So it's not the day that is going to be very important, is obeying God. Just like the fruit is not Eve, the fruit that she ate was not poisonous, right? It did not do her body any harm. But it's disobeying God that caused her to have sinned. Right? It's not, so we are not worshiping a day and shouldn't. The Jews also, even though God commanded them to worship on the Sabbath, they were also exalting the day over Christ. And Christ said, no. They were so much fanatics over a day, but that we shouldn't be fanatic over a day. We should just be fanatic. We should be a fanatic at all. We should just be intelligent worshipers obeying what God says. So if God says go north, and you go south, something's going to. It's not because south is whatever. It's just a direction. But the fact of the matter is that obeying God is what counts and not necessarily south or north. So you're correct. It's from that God will judge. Correct. He will judge the heart, but he's also judging obedience. So we have even sinners themselves are faithful to the Sabbath day, but still the Lord rejected them absolutely because of their wicked heart. Their minds were full of mischief. You're correct. Just like the Jews, they were worshiping God on Sabbath and saying they were doing according to the Torah, but God destroyed them because they were what? They were wicked and evil, right? And they were exalting. That's why Christ said, I am the Lord of the Sabbath day. So when Christ healed people on the Sabbath, when he actually fed the people on the Sabbath, the Jews were saying, why are you working on the Sabbath? Why are you doing that? And Christ says, you ought to do what? To do good, right? So if you see your sheep that is lost, won't you go into the ditch and, retrieve your sheep? But they were exalting a day over God, and we must not exalt any day or any food or any country over God. We must exalt God for who he is. However, it does not negate that we also have to obey what he says. Agreed, Andrew, but people are the most lazy, weak, and indoctrinated they have ever been. This is still a good thing, but only for those of us willing to work for salvation, unlike others who want to be led. And can we work for salvation? I think that it's a faith, because the fact of the matter is that no one of ourselves can work and please God. That's another thing that other religions preach, that we of ourselves can be good, right? That's why the rich young ruler went to Christ and says, all of these things I've done. And Christ says, well, if you've done all of them, go and sell all of your goods, then follow me. And he says, I can't do that. I'm not going to sell all my possessions and for you, which means, therefore, that man was not committed to God. Because whatever God says, even when it sounds stupid, even when you're going through some rough times, it means that is what he means, and that is what you must do. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense, but God also works out of rationality. It's another thing we need to understand. God can operate in rational science, and he can operate outside of it. And this is where people now begin to say, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, because God is infinite. So when we want to box God into a thing and into a box, but God is bigger than a box because he's infinite. He has infinite knowledge, right? And that is where people begin to question, that doesn't sound rational, right? But does everything have to be rational? Yes, in man's eyes, yes, but in God's eyes, no. Even Christians who worship on the Sabbath day is still disobey God's right. They do, and many of them will be lost. It's not the day, as you're saying, Afro Grenada, that is going to save people. It's the heart, and it's the sincerity, and it's obedience. But we still have to get rid of sin. We have to get rid of sin. So if you're sinful and you're still obeying and worshiping on the Sabbath, you can be destroyed, and God is going to destroy. And there are lots of Sunday people. There are lots of Sunday people who worship God on Sunday. Lots of atheists, some of them who just did the best that they know, are going to be saved. Did you know that? People who think they're the Christians and only Christians are going to be saved and whatever. God reads the heart, and he knows. But if you are exposed to information and you have the opportunity to know, he is going to hold you accountable. So everything is what we know. If we don't know it and we live to the best light we have, then God understands. And that's why God is an understanding God. He's not how man thinks. So people, I'm worshiping on the Sabbath, I'm doing what God says. It doesn't mean that you're going to be saved. Women to lead, appointing them to be pastors, which God condemns. Yeah, that's a big thing now too. That women, because of the equality movement, the gender equality movement we have now, they're saying women can be pastors. Now, when we think about roles of women and men, we have to look differently from what we see in secular societies. Nothing is wrong in secular society for women to be prime ministers and presidents and so forth, right? But because they don't represent God, they represent, that's the system that they function in. But under God, a priest or a pastor represents Christ, and Christ is a male. He's not a male in terms of he's God, but he actually shows himself as a man, right? He's represented as a man. So the fact of the matter, if a female is a pastor, a bishop, and the Bible says that a bishop should be a husband of one wife. It didn't say a wife of one husband. Right, so the Bible is very clear on that. People don't want to follow it because they say that, we're living in modern times. But the Bible is not modern or ancient. The Bible, God always lives in the present. He says, I am. Right? So when people say, oh, the Bible is 2,000 years old. No, God always lives in the present because he's eternal. So he never ceases to exist. Right? He's in the past, in the present, and the future. Something we can't understand. That is amazing. Now, and then we have the scriptures you just quoted is interpreted to the worship means they will idolize the system of the beast, not about a gathering. And that's what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be a gathering. Idolization is worshiping. So if I place most of my time on gambling, on watching sports, it's my idols, and that is my worship. It does not mean going to a church and worship in the traditional sense. The same way, if I have faith in Ibrahim Traore that I think he's going to transform the world, which I don't think he is going to do and can and will be able to do, right? Then that is your idol, and you are actually worshiping him. And many of us do worship our politicians, and we worship the people, our fans, the fans in Hollywood and all. People worship them, right? But they don't worship them by bowing down. They don't have to necessarily bow down to them and say God and Goddess and whatever, right? They worship them by idolizing them. So you're correct, Afro-Grenadian. That is how they're going to worship, not by necessarily bowing down. All right, because they can't really come at everybody and say worship billions of people in the world. They won't be able to do that, but they will know what you're doing and what you're not doing. Let us say, for example, that when they implement a day of worship, you might not go to a church, but if they see you that you're like working on the day or you're doing something that they tell you not to do on that day, then you are going to be what? You're going to be held accountable and they will penalize you. So it's not going to be like you have to go to church. That's not what they're going to ask you about, right? What they're going to tell you to do is that certain things, they're going to lay rules down that certain things you're not going to be able to do. Now, that is your interpretation, but others will say different because back then they treated women like second-class citizens. Yeah, but when we talk about roles don't mean equality or inequality, right? In the biblical sense, roles mean that you are of a service. Do you know that? When you say a pastor servant, he's a servant. A prime minister should be a servant. We are the ones who have elevated them to make them think that they're in these very important positions. But in biblical language, a leader is to be a servant leader. So Christ, when before his death, his crucifixion, he literally washed the feet of his disciples. And Peter said, why are you washing my feet? Because they know that he was Lord. But he said that if you don't do this practice of humility, you won't make it into God's kingdom. Why? Because God's understanding of leadership is not that you are going to be sitting in an office and being worshipped and idolized by your followers. Is that you're going to go out there and you're going to deal with the sufferings of people and help them. That is what we call servant leadership. Many of the females and even our male pastors now are not doing that anymore. Their congregations are big and all they want is to have money, and every day, every Sunday or every Sabbath, they go to church and they preach and they feel very important and they dress and they look like they are the next, idol, or what do you call them again? The celebrity, right? But that is not biblical. And that is what we have now come up into a world where we think leadership and leaders are celebrities. And that does not align with the Bible. The Bible means that you are there to be a servant. If you tell a woman that she's going to be a servant, or a male that they're going to be a servant as a teacher or as a pastor, they're going to say, no, I don't want to do it then, because they want to be respected and they want to feel as if they are in a high position. We think of hierarchy when we think of leadership. God thinks about hierarchy too, but he thinks more of servantship, leading some people, and service of humility, practice of humility, and not wanting to magnify and idolize ourselves as many of our leaders do right now. Those are the conveniences people will sell themselves for with Wi-Fi, fast food money, just like they did in lockdown. Get vaxxed and keep your job. Your job, or be hired. And by the way, very good, very well said. And by the way, about those women too, when you think about a pastor should visit his flock. And it's a very demanding role, you know. So let us say, for example, that a woman has children and she has to be getting up and going out to meet with her flock because this is happening. It's too much work. And because the office has become so managerial than what it should be now, that is why women want to be a part of it, but it's not that they should. So God knows best, you know. He knows that, you know, in terms of the energy it requires, the physical energy for women to be pastors is almost not. You know, I was also a part of a congregation where a woman became a pastor, and she was literally in the pulpit acting like a man, preaching. She had to jump up and she was blah, 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 and, you know, and I'm like, that's not necessary. Why are you doing that? Right? Because that is the role. So we don't want, and we see a world now in which roles are now being confused because people think that everything that a man does, a woman can do, and vice versa. And that is not true. Many things we can. And I believe in women equality. I believe that women should get equal salaries for the same job that they do that men do. But I think certain roles would be better if men do than women, and vice versa. I think that some roles that women do or lead out in are better than, for example, at home, when you think about nurturing of the children, men can't do it. As much as they try to do it, can't do it. Because by nature, that's not their role. And also, even taking care of the home, women do a better job, right? So the fact of the matter is that God made us to complement each other and not to compete with each other. And that is another thing I must say. We like to compete ourselves and compare to say, well, you are in that position. No, it's working together to make our society better, to make school system better, to make the home better, right? And that is what we're made to do. Very good program, brother. Enjoying it. Thank you so much. And I hope that you will like it and also send it out to people so that the algorithm will send it out. Trevor, they always had and will continue to have those types of people. The slaves that wanted freedom died trying, and some didn't want freedom. Many didn't want. And that's not because they didn't want, I should say. Let me just be careful of what I say. It's not the slaves did not want freedom. It's that they were accustomed to the routine and the rhythm of their lives. Just like many of us right now, we're slaves to it. So we're accustomed to what we're seeing in the world, and we think that the world is going to just move on and transition to another phase, and life will go on as it is, or perhaps be better. I don't know how we think it's going to be better, but somehow people think that they are comfortable until they become uncomfortable. Right? So we are the same right now too, that we are happy in our slavery. We think that this is the way how the world should work, and we think that I'm okay, I'm good, right? I'm good until you're not good. Women can be anything outside God's church, but inside his temple, women have the specific roles to teach the younger women and teach the children. That is what I believe too. And based on the hierarchy, remember now too, even among the Godhead, right, that God the Father, even though they are co-eternal, you know, and they're co-equal everything, but God the Father has the superior in that Godhead, followed by Christ, followed by the Holy Spirit. So they have their roles too that they play. And if they are God and they're not competing with each other, what says us, right? We should be happy for what? The angels also, they have distinct roles. And that's why Lucifer was the highest before he became the devil. And because he was so exalted, he thought that he was God. So he was where the first came with the whole matter of, you know, being a celebrity and wanting to be God himself. And he fell, right? He fell from his high power. So we have to be very careful of wanting and elevating ourselves. We should see our roles as playing a service, right, to humanity and not just wanting to be popular, right? Pedro always, that's why believing in unity is a joke and is always being used to hurt others, especially by those loyal to the system. Yeah, we can never be unified in lies. We can only be unified in the truth. We can never be unified. That's why the false religion that they're trying to unite the world, they will never accomplish it because it is a lie. It's a false religion, which means false means lies. So they're going to tell you a lot of lies, just like the pandemic, right? And that's why that fell apart. Look at the pandemic. It fell apart, even though they really used great propaganda. And the world actually was saying, yes, I have to do it. I have to, but the fact of the matter, it didn't succeed holistically because they were lying. So you can never actually unite the world. If they were telling us the truth, if during the pandemic they were telling us the truth, people would have, followed what they said. Everybody would have followed what they said. But people somehow afterwards realized, including doctors, that they were lying. They were deceiving the populace. The same thing with a false religion is going to deceive. They can pray, sing, dance, but not lead a congregation. Yeah, because again, the priest is a servant that represents Christ, and Christ is not a woman. Some people say Christ, no, God is not a woman, even though he can, he can appear as a form of a woman, but he did not express himself as a woman. Remember now, Adam was the head leader, and after Eve actually ate of the forbidden fruit, sin did not enter the world, it entered the world through Adam, because he was the man, and God told him, put him in charge. And he should be her head. Not that he should be her dictator, but he should be the one to make the final decision. They should have had the conversation. Had Eve just said, okay, let me call my husband and wait on him to see what he's going to say, and they had a discussion of what she saw and what he presented to her, it could have been avoided. But she said she took initiative, just like many women are doing today. They want to be famous, and then their home life, they can't nurture their children because they can't be there. They don't have time for the children, and our societies are what now? Destroyed, right? Because women are so much involved in society that they can't. Everybody's teaching their children, not them. So you send your children to these little, cradle schools, and then what happens to them? They learn from other women, from other people, from other children. And then they take home these things to your home. And then when they become naughty and you can't control them, you really wonder why. Because again, the nurturing did not happen because women have to work. Now, I'm not against women working. I'm just saying that our home life has been damaged because of what has taken place with women having to go out and work. And then at the end of the day, the family life suffers. Because people think that family life is just having children and taking them to activities, and that is what, afterwards, everything is fine and dandy. I ain't no slave with you. Well, the fact of the matter, if you're in a system that is controlled, I am sure that you're controlled. How much can you, you're just say we're all a slave. But if you understand, we're not slave in terms of mental slavery. We're a slave to the system. So we have to do what the system tells us to do, even though we might not want to do it, right? The economic system, we're enslaved to it, okay? That's why we have to pay high interest rates. We have to pay high rents. We have to pay high mortgages. We have to accede to what they're saying. Speaking of feminism, Motley's government has placed as many career women as possible as the head in many major positions, and many weak, effeminate men or sold out men with no moral secondary to them, hellfire. One of the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah and also Greek and all of these major empires was effeminate men in the Roman Empire too, right? So as women now get more visibility and are leading men have no other reason but to become effeminate. And that is what is happening. So we don't have real male leaders anymore. Right? We just have people who are just there and say they have a position. And this is what has happened, that we are seeing now where the role of men and women, has been blurred. And that's why people are saying now there's no difference between a man and a woman. And science is now corroborating that, or pretends to corroborate that, because of the way the world has moved. And that's also another form of worship and religion. Okay, when people are telling us that there's no difference between a man and a woman, they're telling you that they can create. And because if God is the one who created you and created us and told us that there's a difference between a man and a woman, who is another scientist to say that they're made to that? But that is how they train us, and people believe it and they run with it and they behave as if they're important, don't they? Define God and don't get flustered like some people. I don't get flustered when people ask me to define God. God is infinite. He's eternal. He's omnipresent. He's omniscient. He's omnipotent. right? And that's what defines him. Now, to suggest that you are going to define him in as a man defines another man because he's infinite, that would be stupidity. Because as the Bible says, can a man find out God? Can he search? Can he find him out? And he said, no, because as far as the heaven is from the earth, we will never, even in existence, eternity, find out who God is. Then because he's going to be ceased to be God. If you are going to find out God and knows his whatever, is the length and the breadth of his power, then he's no longer God. He's just one of us. He's a creature. And God is not a creature, he's God. And that's what sets him apart, right? That's what sets him apart, that he is not our equal. And I think that oftentimes men treat God as their equal until he shows up. And when he shows up and he shows his power, it's not pretty, right? It's not pretty. Knees begin to be knocked, right? Because when he shows himself, then we get. Can you imagine when you hear the thundering and sometimes people run and they're afraid? Can you imagine? And that's just a little inkling of God's power. Now, so we have Andrew, do you think they're going to accomplish their religious mandate? They are going to, no, I don't think that they're going to fully accomplish it, but I think that they are going to try, and in going through that process, many people are going to be killed. Because again, they're going to be so dictatorial and so autocratic, as we saw what happened even in Nazi Germany. That was what Nazism was trying to do. They were trying to unite Europe under fascism, and Nazism was a form of religion, by the way, and eventually it didn't work. France was trying to do it. So this is not the only. Okay, let's be clear now that this is not the first time that human beings have been trying to build a one-world religion. From the very first book, from the Tower of Babel, as we're saying, right down through history, right down through all empires, the Babylonian Empire, Medes and the Persians, the Greek, the Romans. Well, we still under the Roman Empire, the extension of the Roman Empire. But all of these major empires have always been trying to unite the world under a religion, but they've never succeeded, but it has resulted in the death of many people, and that's why it's dangerous, right? But this time around, the stone that the Bible says that is going to hit that toes and the feet that we're right down on the Roman Empire is going to destroy all of these major religions from Babylon right down to Rome, under which we are currently under that Roman Empire, on the United States, because the United States is a divided part of Europe, and it was a part of the 10 kingdoms of Europe that the Bible speaks about. One of the things about history, and when I was studying Spanish, and we were talking about these things, the professor, when I was undergraduate, told me to get up and teach the class. Do you know that? Because I had already studied these things in history, in the Bible. The professor, who had a PhD, told me to get up and teach the class what I knew about some of the things that she was talking about, because I was already exposed from childhood to some of these things, and to be at university and know that people there were just like, never heard of that before, right? So the Bible is no stupid book, You said the Daniel and Revelation and these books are hard to understand. And even though you read them right throughout your life, there are lots of things. And then one verse that makes you really, you have to go back to history, you have to go back to geography, you have to go back to so many and consult, you have to go back to language to look at the derivative and what language is being used here and compare it to each language source and so forth. It's highly intellectual. But we think in some book you just hear some stories and you move on. But let us look at the Bible, for example. The Bible is a book of history, of literature, of philosophy, of science. It tells you about science too, how we came about, and lots more, health, hygiene, right? So there's so much to learn from it, but people just think it's some stories. But the same thing I thought about history, secular history. I thought history were just some stories about the British came to the Caribbean and they conquered us and all. But it was when I grew up, I realized that It was not just some stories. And if you study history at the graduate level, because I did a lot of history at the graduate studies level, and you're just reading a lot of narratives, slave narratives, that sort of narrative, this narrative, but the narratives were just not about telling you a narrative. It was really telling you what was happening in the society. You read literature, and we think, oh, Lonely Londoners, for example. You read that text. You read In the Castle of My Skin by George Lamming and these books, and you think that they were just some dead stories. But a lot of times they were giving you an insight into what was happening in the Barbadian society, under British colonialism, etc., etc., etc. So that's what, when we read the Bible, we have to read what was happening in the society of Babylon. And sometimes you have to go back to history, to geography, to understand what the Bible is saying. But when you align history and geography with what the Bible says, it's always true. That's my thing, and many people have suggested that's my experience with it. So it's no easy book, as people are suggesting that it's some simplistic book that has been written and people are stupid for even believing in it. It's not that, because people don't know how to read it. Just like history, people don't know how to interpret history. They hate it because they think it's some dates that are being given, and we're not living history. When I go to Brazil, I see the history right on the streets of the people that I was reading about. You just see the Portuguese and all of the Africans and the members of the European nations. It's history alive. I'm walking it, and I say, wow, look at what I was studying. I'm now walking the streets of Rio de Janeiro, and I'm seeing what I was reading in a textbook is right here, and I'm living it. And that is what the Bible is about too. So yeah. So Pedro de Mott, man create God in his own image. I think it's vice versa, because where did you come from, Pedro de Mott? Who created you? How did you arrive here? That is what you have to understand. Science doesn't answer that question, doesn't even ask the question. Well, it suggests that we are here through evolution, but in a Big Bang, and that does not make any sense. So who created whatever that came from the Big Bang? And before the Big Bang, whatever little hydrogen that was used, who created that hydrogen? And science has not been able to answer it. Stephen, yes, they will accomplish it. Take a look at the Spanish Inquisition, and perhaps Daniel as an example. Hide and worship, or be found die. But the Spanish Inquisition, they never accomplished it. But we're saying, Trevor, that they didn't accomplish the agenda of the one world religion. So yeah, the Spanish Inquisition, the Inquisitions of the world, the French had Inquisition too, right? But they never accomplished. Remember that Napoleon, when during the Haitian Revolution, that was his actual goal, to unite the world under a Franco, sort of power. But what happened under Catholicism, by the way, because the church was the one that controlled Napoleon, and Napoleon spoke against the church. If you read the history of Napoleon, he says he did not like the way how the Jesuits and the Roman Catholic Church behaved, but they controlled him. And when he did not achieve what they wanted him to achieve, they spat him out of their mouths. Right? But the fact of the matter is that Napoleon, during the Haitian Revolution, was trying to also unite the world under that Franco Empire, right? And that's why he wanted to take over the United States. Had he won Haiti, had Haiti not won the revolution, we would have been living in a different world. The British would never have control over the United States. We would not be living in an Anglo world now as we're seeing it. We live in a Francophone world. But that didn't happen. He was just about to accomplish it when something in history mysteriously happened and prevented him from doing that, along with the Haitian Revolution that prevented him from taking over the United States and making this hemisphere the hemisphere of France. So that is what we have to understand. It happened, but they never gained it. All of these empires wanted to unite the world, right? But they didn't achieve it. If you have to do what the system tells you to do, and be quiet or keep talking and thinking and still do it, that makes sense. Let's see what you're saying. Or are you asking a question? I don't know. This is a war of relativity being waged on people. A woman can be a man. He can birth babies. Everything are constructs, including natural order, which is truth. That's the order today. So chaos reigns. And that's what we call it, Babylon. That is why we call it Babylon, because it is a Babylonian system. Let's get to the clippings that I want to finish my clippings, and then we can come back to your comments. let's get with them because I have them and I don't want to make the live too long. So let me get to the look at this. I want to look at this. Black people, all right, and how we were different in the 1940s than we are now. Talk about liberalism and like what we're dealing with now and
The one and
creativity.
only Albert Einstein visiting a historically black college in Pennsylvania, Lincoln University, all the way back in 1946. This HBCU was the first black college that was actually credited to give out degrees. You guys got to remember what America was like back in 1946. They didn't want black people to have any education. They didn't want us to have any upward mobility. And when Albert Einstein came here, he thought racism was one of the craziest diseases from white people. Those are his words, not mine. So during his commitment address, Einstein delivered a scathing critique of American race relations, famously stating the separation of the races is not a disease of colored people, but a disease of white people. I do not intend to be quiet about it. By 1946, Einstein was in failing health and found large university ceremonies ostentatious, leading him to decline almost all speaking invitations. He made a rare exception for Lincoln University, specifically to support social justice. I have a question, okay? I understand redlining and I understand everything that the government purposely put in place to block Black Americans from upward mobility. But what I don't understand is what happened to the mind of our people, right? Look at these Black men. They are ostentatious. They want to learn. They want to create. They want to go up. What happened? Because it's almost like all we want to do is be sports stars, rappers, and entertainers, right? Jesters. We went from being the leaders to being 100% just jesters out here. What do you guys think happened to where generation after generation after generation of Blacks just literally stopped wanting to compete in the areas that actually mattered, right? That the areas of society that we need to be in to make change for our group of people, we gave up on those areas. And I'm just trying to understand what happened.
He's asking some very important questions. When we look at what is happening in our world now and the way how particularly Black males, we talk about the whole leadership position and Black males and the way how the Black man is carrying himself now, we would have thought that with all of this progressivism, that Black males would have a purpose in life. And look at where we are now. Most of us in the United States, for example, are in prison. If you go to Jamaica, most Black men are on the streets just liming, just not doing anything, not interested in education anymore, don't even know who he is anymore, right? Look at the eyes of those men. Look in their eyes. They seem to have had a purpose. Look at how they dressed, right? And they were just at university. At Lincoln University, a Black university in the United States. If you go to Howard now and look at how these men dress, with the baseball cap and whatever, the baggy jeans and walking like a hip hop artist, where are we going? And the society that we claim that is postmodern, that we think is better, is it really better? Or has it destroyed civilization? Has this postmodernist, ideology destroyed civilization and destroying our people? And you will see some of them who say that they're the most educated about Black culture and they're Pan-Africanist and the way how they carry themselves, right? Oh, it's Africa, and everything that is bad, everything that lacks standard, we have to associate with Africa. Because we want to rebel. We're rebellious people, and we want to rebel against civilization that is helping to increase. Now, let me say something. If we were being the Rastafarians and, the baggy jeans and were productive, then I could say, well, yeah, they have a point there because they have their baggy jeans and they're still productive and they're still educated, right? And they make sense when they talk. But I'm not seeing that. What I'm seeing is that this, baggy jeans and wanting to be a hip hop star and a celebrity and being stupid. And right now, Black culture is stupid for the most part. It's stupid because all we want to do is talk about Africa, romanticize about Africa. Africa is a religion. And then what happens? It destroys us. Because you can't sit down, the Jews living in other countries can't sit down and think that they're going to go back to their land. The Irish who were living in America, when they went to America, they were treated as trash. The Italians were treated also as trash. In fact, there are reports in the history of slavery in America where they said the Italians were like the Negroes, they're nasty and dirty and whatever. All of the words of denigration. But the fact of the matter is that they can't romanticize going back to Italy. They're already in the United States and they had to cope with that environment. Right? So we need to get up and start and stop romanticizing about a continent. We can help to build the continent. That was what Marcus Garvey said. So we should bring back our good skills, our education, whatever we have honed to build Africa. Nothing is wrong with that. But to suggest and to romanticize that Africa is going to be the new source of freedom, that is not going to happen. If we are not even free here, our minds are not free, how can Africa be free? It's ridiculous. And we need to go back to basics. So let's go back now to some of what you guys are saying. Please be patient with me. I lost where I was. I think it was Trevor who was saying this is a war of relativity being waged on people. A woman can be a man and he can birth babies, everything are constructs, including natural order, which is truth. That's order today. So chaos reigns. It is chaos. It is chaos. This is Babylon, right? That's why the whole matter of the Tower of Babel, that's why I did it today, because it's fitting, because they are rebuilding a Tower of Babel on this, what we call chaos, right? In this chaos. But they say order Abu Cow, which that they're building a civilization out of chaos. They also out of order, out of chaos will come the order that they're suggesting. They're going to make the order, but in a draconian way. They're going to force you, they're going to coerce you to do what they want you to do. I believe it's during the Reagan and senior Bush administration, they spoke about this also. Do you have some folks in the nation put a curve ball in that? Yeah, they did. And you believe in the beginning they were nothing but the word? Yeah, I believe in that. Why do I believe in it? Because the fact of the matter, when I look at the Bible throughout from Genesis to Revelation and what it has said, not only one book or one verse, I think that it aligns with what is happening in our world. The prophecies that it has said, there's no other being in the universe that can tell you about prophecy and tell you in a way that exactly how it happened in history. I don't see any other book doing it. Right? So, and the future and exactly what is happening, we're seeing even right now. Wars being waged around the world, confusion, we're becoming another Sodom and Gomorrah, right? All of that are biblical prophecies. Ever learning and never being able to come to a knowledge of the truth. People are thinking that they're learning, they're going to school, and they're never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. They're just building up knowledge, and knowledge is not empowering them to come to a knowledge of the truth. Trevor, I hear you. I just wonder, what country am I going back to? Right. There is no country to go back to, mother and father. And one of the things is that if you go back to Barbados tomorrow, if you go back to Jamaica, if you go back to Grenada, the same thing is happening that is happening in the world. Right? It's like nothing is changing. So if we go to any society, the entire world now is messed up, and everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody is on the phone, everybody's liming, everybody's on TikTok, right? Everybody's making reels, everybody's dancing, doing the same thing, using the same language. Notice that people are even using the same language, right? They're expressing themselves similarly, nothing new, right? Despite what you believe about the Bible, it is the only book, Afro-Grenada is saying, that has been consistent with world events since the foundation of the world. It is. There's none. Because no other being can tell you the future. No other being, right? Even, remember now, when you study the book of Daniel 2, go back to Daniel 2, and when King Nebuchadnezzar had that vision, right, and he went to his very educated men of Babylon, the wise men, the philosophers, the astrologers, and he said, can you really, I dreamt last night and I saw something and I want you guys to tell me what I dreamt. And you know what they told him? How can you come to us and ask us to tell you what you dreamt? There's no gods in this world that will be able to do that, except the gods that are not in this world, not of this world. But they were the ones who were giving him the impression, Nebuchadnezzar, that they were diviners and that they could read your mind. Just like they're telling us that the AI and these things are going to be able to read our minds. But they will not be able to read your mind. They will tell you false things. So when Nebuchadnezzar now, because Nebuchadnezzar knew, well, he had an understanding, he had a remembrance, but could not remember. You know, sometimes you have something on the back of your brain. But if they had told him something wrong, he knew that it would not have been the dream that he dreamt. So when he actually called Daniel, the Hebrew, one of the Hebrews, then in Babylon, he was able to tell him the dream, but not only the dream, the interpretation thereof, which is right now still applicable to that dream that a pagan king had. Can you imagine? And that is why God is not a God of this restrictive God that people think, because God gave a dream that lasted now and is defining current events even now to a pagan king, not to the Jew. To the Jew, he gave the interpretation. Right, but he did not give the dream to one of the Jews. He gave the dream to a pagan king who became eventually a man of God. No, Andrew, Trevor is saying, when I refer to the Spanish Inquisition, believers outside the religion of the day were killed very violently. That's what, okay, you were referring to. Correct, because we're now moving. There was a Barbadian, by the way. If you go on YouTube, he did a very good video on the, like, what was it called? Something of the resurgence of the Spanish Inquisition. His name is Cameron Bowen. Cameron Bowen was a very good, I had a lot of respect, historian. He died in 2021, I think, unfortunately. Any other way is unnatural. That's what Pedro is saying. Stephen, you mean term of exile? Yeah, anywhere we go now, I mean, go back to Barbados. It's not going to help, you know. You know, anywhere we are. I thought going back to Jamaica years ago was going to help me. And when I went back to Jamaica, they had moved on. And they were doing what they're doing. You're not going to connect again, Stephen. You're just not going to connect. Having lived in the United States so many years, it's going to be hard to reconnect. Their God, no, my bro, no such thing as that. No one, no way around. That's what alone by myself. Christianity is a lie, aka a great deception and strong delusion. So, what is the truth, Michael? Can you tell me? You can get 3 persons out of Alone by Myself. Is it a book? Is Alone by Myself a book? No way around Isaiah 44, verse 24. So how are you reading Isaiah 44, verse 24, and you say the Christian religion? Isn't Isaiah a Christian, the Bible? So why do you read that book if the Christian religion is deception? Am I misunderstanding something here? Stephen, Sai, Barbados, like most of these other countries, are lost right now. This desperation, anarchy, etc. Things are on a path we cannot control, but we can control how we respond to the ills. You know, if you are willing to accept that, you know, Barbados is not the same, that we romanticize. Even those of us who live in the United States, we sometimes romanticize the idea of going back to our countries and they're going to be the same, but they're not going to be the same. And many of us who have returned realize that they're not the same. The same thing going back to Africa now after so many centuries of being out of Africa. You and I have never lived in Africa. Well, maybe some of you did or have. But the fact is that it won't be what we think it is, right? Because I think we have sometimes these pictures and paintings in our heads that tell us that life in Barbados or life in Grenada is better, you know, and to some extent it might be, because sometimes it might be cheaper there than where you are in the United States, and might be less violent too. Barbados is very quiet and peaceful. So maybe from that perspective. Stephen is saying, no, it's not better, and you would have to blame, or someone blame the hip-hop culture for that. Music is very powerful. Yes, and I was looking at the video there. I was showing you guys with it's not the same. Look at the guys and how they were dressed and how they looked hungry for knowledge. They were listening to a very great scientist, Albert Einstein, right? And they were just captivated by his knowledge. I'm sure they weren't captivated by his race. They were captivated by his knowledge and the knowledge that he was dispensing to them about whatever they were talking about. And that was what we used to be like. You know, and what they're telling us now is that you have to be, if to be African, you have to have your hair disheveled, and you have to not dress well, you have to look like a ragaton. I don't know. We have strange philosophies of what being African means, right? And can we be African and be Western too? Let me ask a question. I think I probably need to have a video on that. Can we be African in the diaspora and be Western at the same time? I'm going to make a video on that, and I want you guys to come on that video. Let me not ask that question right now. The worse things get, the worse. That's Trevor is saying. The more things I get, the worse things get, the more. They are told it was like this before, that this is life, just that social media is showing it today, which can easily be debunked. You're correct. I agree 100%. Welcome to the live, Mr. Beats. That's Beats slide. Why not just kill? Who care? Right. Well, I think we do care. That's sad. But we have that Alfred Grenada is saying, Pedro, there were no wars before creation. The beginning was nothing until God spoke things into existence. And that's what the whole thing, that there was no war before, sin came into our world. And that is why until sin is actually eradicated, then we will have wars, we will have poverty, we will have everything. When the Bible says that you'll always have the poor, the Bible did not mean that God wanted people to be poor. The God understood that because sin exists and men are greedy, men are lazy too, and they're selfish, poverty will always exist. All right. So when they're telling you that we're going to become everybody's going to be all equal, that is not true, because that will never happen. Even in heaven, people are equal. The citizens of heaven are equal, but they have different roles, and some roles are higher than some. All right. So having this hierarchy of all of us are on equal footing is not also biblical. Right. We are equal in God's sight, but we have different roles to play. And the person who is president is not on the same level as the person who is a normal citizen. Not that the president is supposed to be a celebrity, but his position is a position of respect, right? And to some extent honor, if he does maintain the office, that honor, in the office. Pedro, it does not. It does. Don't try to comprehend it. You will go mad. Yeah, there's no way you can comprehend God. We can't. Because you say, who created God? When if you ask who created God, then he's no God, because he's going to be a created being. So where does it end? You just have to accept. Just like all your parents, there are things that, we're like children before God. God is eternal. And how old are we? Do you know that the oldest man lived for 969 years? Methuselah. Right? So think about us now. We're just living the average age is 70. So the fact of the matter is that we are not even that old to find out enough information. Sometimes we think we know a lot, but think about those people who lived, for 900 years. The people who lived during the period before the flood, they were giants and they lived long. Do you know also that there are scientists who are finding out, bones of the people who live in the antediluvian world, right? And their bones are big, much bigger. And some are also speculating that men at that time could have been like 17 feet tall, 16, 17 feet tall, right? So that is what we're talking. When you talk about David and Goliath, when they check that genealogy also, Goliath could have been, according to the Bible, could have been what we call a 12-foot man. He was big and tall. He was a giant. Right? So men those times were, of great magnitude. We have really deteriorated. We have, what's the word now? The opposite of evolved. We have devolved, right? The world has evolved and also has devolved. It's both. The realities are true. Pedro, to believe is to accept the only truth without having evidence of it or being there to witness it. It is called faith, right? It's just the same thing. Many things we accept in life, there's evidence, but we weren't there. Like when we read history, we weren't there to see everything that happened during history and what the historian is reporting, but we can see the consequences. As I'm saying, when I read about Brazil, I heard about Africans going there. I heard about Germans, Italians, Dutch people going there. The largest Japanese community in Brazil is in Brazil. So when I go to Brazil, I'm expecting to see that, and I see it. And I say, wow, that was, yeah. True history. Even though I wasn't there, a lot of Japanese went to Brazil, right? Or a lot of Africans went to Brazil because Brazil is heavily black. right? So you can see that. So there's evidence only that you were not there when the evidence was happening, right? But you have faith that based on what you're seeing, yeah, I'm seeing some consequences. I'm seeing the living fruit of the history. So that is the best way I can describe it. But it's not a blind faith. God has given us enough evidence to weigh our what you call it now, our faith, to rest our faith on. Not to weigh, but to rest he has given us enough evidence. The sun, the star, the moon, the universe, and the whole matter that is infinite. And the more scientists study it, is the more they are trying to unmask and can't unmask. And it's infinite. The fact that we're here and we're still breathing, have you ever even thought that if man or we were here by just coincidence, the sort of structure and cohesion, I'm trying to find the word I want, but I'm not finding it. The sort of cohesion that we have in this world, the order of nature, man cannot replicate. We are the ones damaging it, If we weren't damaging nature, it is orderly. We are the one damaging it. Even the body, the human body alone should tell us that we have to have a creator. Because when you think about the trillion cells that we have, the trillions of cells that we have in our bodies, a body. When you think we are 80% water, and you say 80% water and we're that solid, right? Yeah, you're 80% water. You think about the brain, and that we're not even using even a third of our brain. It means, therefore, that something here, we are much more intelligent than AI because we have not fully trained our human capacity or mental capacity. That is why we are dumb and AI is more intelligent than we are right now. To be westernized, as Trevor is saying, or Americanized is to be modern. That's what they're telling us. The same people fighting America and this globalization are unfortunately ones who lead the change because they see sparks from the fire, and it's pretty correct. And, it is what it is, people. The Roman Empire we are still under the domination of the Roman Empire. When the then world was under the domination of the Babylonian Empire, they had to behave like Babylonians. When they were under the domination of the Medes and the Persians, they had to behave like the Medes and the Persians. When they were under Greek control, we are under Roman Empire, the control of them, right? Not that we should submerge ourselves and submit to falsehoods, but we have to understand that we can't change it. It is what it is. Barbados was a British colony. Jamaica was a British colony. It wasn't a Spanish colony. And we can't change that fact. It is what it is. It is what it is. And many people are telling me about Pan-Africanism too. And I love Pan-Africanism. I love that. I've studied it and whatever. At the same time, they're learning their Pan-Africanism in the West too. Many of them got their degrees from the West, right? They didn't learn it in Africa. They might have gone there for a semester or two and did some studies, but most of their studies were done in the West. So when they're telling me, oh, what's your source? Well, you studied in the West. That's where you got your degree, right? Didn't you? And then we have thanks, Andrew. Yes, a lot of biblical occurrences is backed up by evidence. Yes, there's a lot of ignore because it will trash the theory of there is no God. Because when you think about your parents, and God is your true parent, but when we think about our earthly parents, we believe them. Well, I hope you do, because sometimes some of them are bad. But the good parents, your good parents, you believe them because what they tell you, they showed you that they loved you. And if they told you they were going to do something, they did it. And that's why you believe them the next time. If they didn't do it, then you're going to say, well, I'm not going to believe you, mommy or daddy, because you didn't do what you said you were going to do the other day. But if you take care of your children and you try as much as you can to honor your promises, they will believe you and they believe in you. They believe everything you say. They believe everything that daddy says. Now, if we are so flawed as human beings, right? And children, your own children, believe what mommy and daddy says, and God is perfect. What do we expect? What do we expect? Let's look at two more clippings, and before we go, and because we had them here, I don't want to waste what I saved, and I don't waste food. I don't waste mental food too. Snake and religion, right? Snake and religion. This guy is on spot here with the snake and religion. Now he is an atheist, so that's what he's saying.
Of snakes. They've hidden this knowledge from you. Snakes shed their skin to remove old layers. They represent transformation. They represent the ancient religion of ascension, transforming from a physical being to a spiritual being, low frequency to high frequency. These foods keep you in low frequency, hence why they're all red, orange, and yellow for the lower three chakras. Kundalini is symbolized with snakes because you're transforming sexual energy to the brain. That's why the medical symbol uses a snake, because they transform your health back to healthy. Every ancient culture and religion uses snakes. Snakes represent the ancient religion of mental or spiritual alchemy, turning lead into gold. Lead ruled by Saturn, physical matter. Gold ruled by the sun, enlightenment. Turning low-level desire and pleasure into wisdom, intuition, and expression. Raising your thoughts and consciousness out of the lower half of the body to the head. They've hidden the ancient religion of the snake to make you worship a god outside of yourself. Now they give you Allah and Jesus, which are in essence demons in the astral planes. Read the caption to understand that.
Well, do you see what he's saying here? So many people believe in the wisdom of the snake, and they think that the snake, which was a deceiver in the Bible, by the way, what did the devil use to deceive Eve? He came in the form of a snake. And at that time, the snake was the most beautiful creature that God had created. Could fly. Do you know what the snake in biblical times, when it was created, it could fly, it had wings. It was one of the most beautiful creatures. That's why Satan actually impersonated himself through that image. And that was what he told Adam and Eve, that if they listened to him, that they would eventually become like gods. The world today is telling us that to accept the one world religion, we are going to become like gods. And that's why many people are going to accept it, because they think that whatever knowledge that is being gleaned from all the things that you're learning that is outside of biblical knowledge, because knowledge is important, don't get me wrong, but can it be corroborated by the Bible? If it can't, leave it, right? Don't eat it, because if you do, it might seem that you are knowledgeable. But I've seen many people who have dabbled into many different, fountains of knowledge, and they find that they're destroyed. They're crazy. They go berserk. Because guess what? And they were trying to find something to satisfy their soul, but after what, just like what Eve and Adam were trying to do, but when they realized that the serpent deceived them, and they were not elevated, they were actually debased. The devil destroyed our first parents, and they realized that they were going to have to die. Right? And that is what has plagued humanity ever since. Every time there's a funeral service, I looked and I tried to put myself in Adam's and Eve's place. I'm wondering, how did they, who had never seen death before, how did they deal with it? If we can mourn, and we have become accustomed to death every day we see it, right? Those two creatures who had not been accustomed to death before. Now we are seeing right now the death of a society that had freedom, right? That had some amount, even though it wasn't perfect, had some amount of dissent where we could argue things, we could debate some science and whatever. We're seeing now where we are moving now into a religious society in which nothing can be debated and challenged. And that is why the founding fathers of the United States, in the very first amendment, they wrote freedom of expression and freedom of religion. Because they understood in the old Europe that because of the lack of freedom of religion, an entire society can collapse. Now, am I saying that they were religious? No, they weren't religious, but they understood that societies must have free exercise thereof, the freedom of determining whether they want to be religious or not, or if they're religious, which God they want to serve. But now, the United States is finally telling us that the Christian God is what the United States needs to command, that all the world people of the world population should follow that religion, right? And that is going to result in a totalitarian state. So God is against what they're doing, God is against it because they want to proclaim themselves as gods. They want to tell you that they are the reigning monarch of the universe, but they're not. And this is where now the thing is. People are thinking that when we say one world religion is because it's not because I want a one world religion, but because it is going to be. And they're going to command your worship. And it's not going to church necessarily is actually obeying them. And that is why people say during the pandemic, church members say, well, what does a vaccine have to do with your conscience? Well, if you know that the vaccines were harmful to your bodies and you consumed them, you committed suicide. And that is going to result in your death. That is suicide, You knew it was wrong, but you did it because your friends did it, and you did it because your doctors told you to do it. If you knew it was wrong, based on the science you had studied, based on other opinions, medical opinions that you had listened and read, then that was wrong. It was immoral. Where it was not moral, now if you didn't know, and you thought that whatever, but if you were convinced that is worship, and you took it, you're worshiping a system. Okay? It's not necessarily going to church and putting up your hands in the air, right? That is not, when we say worship, it doesn't have to always do with going to a church. It's worshiping at the altar of what somebody's saying because they're commanding you to do it. You don't have freedom of choice. You can't say, no, my conscience does not permit me to do it. Then that is a form of worship. Because you are what? God speaks through the conscience. And when you allow another source to speak through your conscience, that is worship. That is ultimate worship. You're obeying God. You're obeying man, rather. You are obeying God, man rather than God. Then we have the snake is a symbol, signifies danger. It could be, but it's also a symbol that many religions, as he's suggesting, use. And he's not a religious person, by the way. He was actually opposing, what, the WHO, yes, they are symbols of a one-world religion. And Grenada, it's the people with wealth of knowledge are who is making life difficult for us. They're the ones, absolutely. It's the people with enough of knowledge. That's what the Bible says. In all your wisdom, get understanding. In all your wisdom. And it means, sabiduría, conocimiento, knowledge, get understanding. Because you can have a lot of knowledge, but if you don't have understanding, why do you think your literature teacher, right? Your teacher of literature, they would say to you sometimes, and I was one too, why are you telling me the story? Interpret. Tell me, you can narrate what happened in the text, but you are not giving me a critique of it. You lack an understanding of the symbols, right? Of the themes, of all of these things. And most children, when you read their analysis of literature, even the Caribbean, they tell you about the story. They narrate the story and tell you what happened in the story. That is what I asked to do. The same thing for history too. A lot of the people who, examiners who, correct history, CXC and A-level, they talk about lack of interpretation, lack of a critical analysis of what they're talking about. You can tell them of what happened, and you because you swat the information and you just give it back to them as you saw it in the textbook. But what they are asking you to do is to be able to actually connect the dots and to interpret what you have read. And many of us can't do that, and that is what the problem is. Now that was slave, and then we have why you ain't obey and took a job like a slave, you're being incoherent. Now, when I say we're slaves, I'm more talking about mental slavery. When we talk about we are slaves in terms of the economic system, we are slaves to it, aren't we? Right. So when in Barbados, Pedro, where you are, and your government is under the strictures of the IMF, it affects you, right? It affects the quality of life you live. It affects the prices of what you are consuming. So yes, from that perspective, we are slaves, but you don't have to be mentally a slave. Many of the slaves who were during slavery weren't slaves, and mentally they weren't slaves. So the people, the bookmans, right, and the other, the slave, those who rebelled against slavery, they were slaves physically, but mentally they weren't. And that's why we say that mental slavery is the worst form of slavery. And that is what they understand, that the system understands that, and that is why we are. That, how is that nonsense, Pedro? That's what I'm saying. That's why you think Marcus Garvey said, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. Because he realized that though Black people were free from the shackles, the physical shackles, they were still slaves mentally. And that's the worst form, because when somebody controls your mind, they control everything. You might have a body, but you don't control it. Right? So yes, I was slave to the system. I had to conform in the sense I did not take the V, but I had to conform in terms of the lockdowns and other things that I didn't want to do, but I had to do it. When they said go in at 8 o'clock, you had to get yourself in, or you're going to be in problem with the law. Right? So yes, we are. And I'm sure that you want them to stop the IMF agreement and all of that stuff. But guess what? This is what it is, and you have to obey. And your government gives a lot of money that it could use to make hospitals. And you blame her. Wow, Miss Mia Motley could have made a hospital. Look at our hospitals, because IMF requires her to pay that money. And she has to do it, right? African say, no wonder why God said, let wisdom be the principal thing before gifts and talents and knowledge, right? Because if we're not wise with knowledge, we can mislead and kill people. And that's why Lucifer, outside of God, there is no being as knowledgeable as Lucifer. None of science, of the Bible, and he can use Bible. He was even using it against Christ himself while on earth, right? Because he's knowledgeable. And that is why he's deceiving the entire world. The kings of this world, the prime ministers, the governments of this world, Lucifer controls them. It is his kingdom. Right? It is his kingdom. And notice that when he told Christ that if you just bow down and worship me, I'll give you the kingdoms of this world, because he said that they belong to me. Because when Adam and Eve sinned, right, Adam was supposed to have the dominion of this world. He was supposed to be king of the earth, but he was supposed to rule under God. Not what he said would go. He would rule under God. This was his dominion. That's why God says, you will have dominion over everything, over all creatures, right? But what did he do? He disobeyed God. And then when he did that, the devil said, well, he's worshiping me now. Well, he wasn't literally worshiping him, but he worshiped him when he disobeyed God. That's the whole point. One of the reasons why God had to kick Adam out of the garden was that he didn't do a big sin like many of us are doing right now. He wasn't a homosexual. He wasn't a fornicator. He wasn't he was a liar in the sense he was disobeying God. He just simply did not follow what God said. A simple instruction. One simple instruction. And he was worshiping the devil. So when we say worship, Adam did not fall down and say, hallelujah to Lucifer. He didn't do that. He just simply did not follow what God said. So if you're following another God, which is the God of this world, the devil is the God of this world, and the politicians behave as if they are gods too, and you obey them, you're worshiping them. All right, so that's what we mean. Worship does not necessarily mean that you're bowing before them, but when you accede to do what they want you to do, even though you know in your heart of hearts that it is not right. Okay. Then we have begging for reparations is being a slave. You're right. but even though we should be begging for it, but we can act. Okay. I think we can write a very respectful letter and ask that it be done. It's not necessarily begging, because it belongs to us. If I come to your house, Pedro, and I take what belongs to you, I'm sure I have the right to come back and say, well, Pedro, you have the right, rather, I'm mixing up myself. You have the right to come to me and say, Andrew, you took that which belongs to me. May I have it? Can you return it? Or if you have used it, please give me back the money that I can replenish it. Right? And that is what we're saying, Pedro, that the fact of the matter is that it's not begging, because they are the ones who stole. But we have said on this platform, we don't agree the way in which they're doing it, because they're overlooking the IMF, other things that bedevil society, corruption in the politics, in the political realm, and they want to behave as if they're going to get the money and use it to build us up, when we're seeing that they've gotten other monies and they have stolen it and they've not used it for what it was designed to be used for. So from that perspective, that is why I argue against it. Okay, but it's not because in principle we should be compensated. We should be they should give us reparations in principle, right? Yeah, I believe in that. Then we have the slave were bought, not stolen. Yeah, but they're laborers. Do you think that even though they were bought, that the money that they worked for, or the lack of money all these years building up empires and building up wealth for Europeans and their descendants, I don't think that was right. So they might have bought them, yes, I agree with you, but at the same time, they spent years, because remember to Pedro, the difference between that slavery and our African slave trade is that the transatlantic slave trade, we must remember that all slaves used to be bought, but they could eventually, after some time, they could work for their freedom and they would get it back. Right? So slaves in former societies, in former civilizations, they would work and gain back their freedom. The transatlantic slave trade did not allow Africans or African descendant people to work for their freedom. They would just work until they're dead. Okay? So that was a very despicable form of slavery. Get over it. They were property. They were not property. They were considered as property. Are you property? I don't think my ancestors were property. They were considered. Just like as I told you that people might say you're mad. You might be considered to be a mad person, but are you mad? You're not. You were considered to be a mad person, to be a crazy person. Thank you so much for joining, and it was a great discussion. I hope that you will understand that we have one life to live, and afterwards we die, and it's a judgment. Right? So let's not take this very lightly. You're not going to be religious because of the world. You are trying to seek and know where you come from and who deserves your worship, whether it is Lucifer, whether it is Hare Krishna, whether it is Allah, or whether it's the God of heaven, or whether it's your money, whether it's your country that you live in. You decide. You have that freedom of the will, right? Freedom of choice to do that to worship whomever you want to worship. But remember now that at the end of the day, there is a judgment. There is a judgment. And you and I, irrespective of where we came from, whether you're European or African or Asian or Middle Eastern or whatever you are, once you have light, you must try to read it and try to walk by that light. I think that we are so fortunate in our Western hemisphere. Yes, guys, slavery was bad. And all of the things that happened to our ancestors. And I cry every day, and I sometimes even ask God. I ask God some of the things that he's doing in my life right now, that I'm going through hard times, but yet still you have to have that faith that God knows best. Right? God knows best, even when you're questioning his will. He always knows best, even when we can't decipher what he is doing. Trust me on that. But the thing about it is that we have access to now. How many of us have grown up in freedom? When you go to certain parts of the world and you see how they live, yeah, we are poor in the Caribbean to some extent, but we have certain level of freedom. Right, where we can crack. When I listen to, for example, a talk show host in Barbados or in Jamaica or Trinidad and Tobago, people are talking and they are free to disagree with whatever the person is saying. Right now, you and I are here and we are free to disagree or agree with what I'm saying, or I can disagree with what you are saying. We have that freedom now, but very soon we won't have it. We have become so accustomed to it because we think that it is given to us by nature, and it is so, but human beings don't necessarily respect nature, as you know. That's why they have wars. Okay? So very soon, they are going to take away that liberty from you, and we won't be able to come on the stream anymore. We won't be able to talk, and some of us will be even betraying each other because, if I'm not doing what they want me to do, they'll set you up as an informer to report on what I am not doing. And that happened during the pandemic. And many friends became enemies during the pandemic because their neighbors reported on them and their family members. There were even family members who called in the authorities to say that their family members wasn't taking the vaccine. So guys, this is not something that I'm here to talk about. This is not a waste of time. This thing should have like millions of people on the live if the algorithm was serious about pushing it. But it's not. So, but we have now to take this seriously because they're moving with their agenda. They're not playing with us. They're not laughing. right? They're serious about this agenda. We're the ones who have been miseducated, misinformed, and we place unnecessary attention on sports, on wars that are happening, and lots of other distractions happening in the world, and we're not looking at the religious factor that is going to shape and to glue this world together, because that's the only thing that they have to. The world is not united, cannot be united on the science, can't be united on the politics. But if you frighten people and cause very strange things to happen in the heavens, including natural disasters, they will cry and bow. They will cry, because that's what human beings are. We're not as brave as we think we are. No, we're dust, as the Bible says. We're not as important as we think we are. We're nothing, right? And that is why we die, and people forget about us. People used to be alive. I'm sure you know, maybe 5 years ago, and they're gone. Who talks about them, right? They're gone. So we must understand that we're not here to stay. We're here to share what knowledge we have and to ensure that people gain knowledge, gain light, and that we can eventually go home to see God, our maker, our creator of the heavens and the earth. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that, let me see a few more of your comments, and you were traumatized. Well, I never were a slave. Then we have great talk. Thank you much, Trevor. And Marie is saying yes. They thank you for a great discussion. Thank you so much, all of you. You make the great discussion, not me. Without you, it would have been nothing. Very true. Yeah, it would have been nothing. You guys have really supported me, and I hope that very soon, when the algorithm pushes the video, I have to send you guys hopefully a gift, because you really have been there through thick and thin. Trinidad and Tobago is now an authoritarian state. Yes, and all of our states, including Jamaica. By the way, I heard that Trinidad also is now, Trump has now imposed tariffs on 12% tariffs on Trinidad. That's terrible. And they're doing what he tells them to do. They give us platforms to talk, and they will take it away. Yes, they will. And they won't take away the platform, but they will take away what we can talk, what topics we can explore. The Bible has two audiences. One see only one, the esoteric, and one who sees or understands the esoteric. The literal interpretations are for the carnal minds. Well, the Bible I don't think the Bible wants to be esoteric. The Bible wants to be real and wants you to understand light, and light is not esoteric. Esoteric means darkness, and the Bible is not dark. They allowed BLM to burn down their cities, yes, and all of that. Welcome, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.